The Neon Sea in Comet Diner was buzzing again, a high-pitched whine that drilled straight into my skull. It always did this when the rain hit it sideways. Tonight, the rain wasn't just hitting sideways, it was trying to drown Graybridge, a real new Columbia monsoon, washing the grime from the gutters only to dump it somewhere else. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of yesterday's grease and coffee that had been sitting on the burner for about 4 hours too long. It was the smell of my life. I wiped the counter, the damp cloth catching on a crack in the laminate, and looked at the pathetic pile of tips by the register. A $5 bill, maybe 6 singles, and a handful of quarters. It wouldn't be enough. Rent for my room on Baythorn Street was due Friday. This pile wouldn't even cover the late fee. My stomach did the familiar cold twist. I was 24 years old, and my entire existence boiled down to the mathematics of single-dollar bills. The bell above the door chimed, a tinny, cheerful sound in the heavy, wet dark. I looked up, plastering the standard-issue Waitress smile on my face. It froze. He wasn't a customer, not our kind anyway. Our customers came in wet. Their coats dripped puddles on the linoleum. Their hair was plastered to their heads. This man was dry. He stood in the doorway for a beat, the flickering red light of the dying sea catching the planes of his face. He wore a black suit, not a cheap, shiny suit, but the kind of black that seemed to drink the meager light in the diner. It was tailored so perfectly it looked less like clothing and more like a part of him. He moved toward the counter, his steps silent. He didn't look at the menu board, didn't look at the pie display. He looked at me. His eyes were the strangest part. Not angry, not friendly. They were calm. The color of the Graybridge River in January, just before it freezes over. A calm that didn't mean peace. It meant absolute control. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was low, smooth, no local accent. "I need to ask a favor. My battery died." He held up a sleek, dead phone. "May I use yours?" I hesitated. My phone was my only link to anything. It was old. The screen cracked, but it was mine. Handing it to a stranger in this neighborhood. "It's an emergency," he said. He didn't sound desperate. He sounded factual. I looked at his face. It wasn't threatening, and he was just waiting. He knew I'd say yes. I found myself unlocking my phone and sliding it across the counter before my brain had fully agreed to it. "Thank you," he said. He didn't move away. He stood right there, dialing a number from memory. I tried to look busy. I refilled the salt shakers. I wiped the already clean coffee machine, but I was listening. "It's me," he said into the phone. A pause. "Obsidian Court moves the hour." That was it. Just that one cryptic sentence. I didn't know what an Obsidian Court was. It sounded like a fantasy novel, but the way he said it was an order. A change of plans that involved things much bigger than a stalled car. He handed the phone back. His fingers brushed mine. They were warm, not cold like I expected. "I appreciate this, Keely Hart Yee," he said. I stiffened. My name tag. He'd read my name tag. "Just Keely," I muttered. He nodded, a small, formal dip of his chin. "Keely." And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it. Through the drumming of the rain, a heavy, rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack in the distance. A helicopter. Not the police chopper, not the medical one. This was heavier, lower. It was the sound of money and power. My gut clenched. The kind of feeling you get right before the thunder hits, when the air pressure drops and all the hair on your arms stands up. This man didn't belong in my world of burnt coffee and dollar store ketchup. He belonged to some other, darker order. He slid a $50 bill onto the counter. For the coffee I'm not having and the phone call. "I can't break this," I stammered, looking at the bill. It was more than my entire night's tips. "Keep it," he said and turned. The bell chimed and he was gone, swallowed by the rain just as suddenly as he'd appeared. I stared at the 50. My rent problem was solved, just like that. But the helicopter sound was getting closer, and my gut told me I had just traded one problem for a much, much bigger one. The $50 sat under the register clip, feeling radioactive. 2 hours passed. 2 entire, agonizing hours. The diner emptied. The rain slowed to a miserable, icy drizzle. It was just me, the buzzing sea, and the dregs of the night. I was scrubbing the grill, the smell of chemical cleaner sharp in my nose, when the pickup truck pulled up. It parked right at the door, angled in, blocking the entrance. It was a heavy-duty truck, the kind construction crews use, but it was too clean. The headlights stayed on, cutting white blades into the diner. The bell chimed. 3 men filed in. They were the opposite of the man in the suit. They were loud, heavy, and they brought the smell of wet wool and cheap whiskey with them. They didn't look at the menu. They spread out. One took a booth by the window. One sat at the counter. The third walked straight to the back, toward the restrooms. "Hey," I called out, my voice sounding weak. "Restrooms are for customers only." The one at the counter, a thick man with a face like mashed potatoes, gave me a slow, greasy smile. "We're customers. Coffee, 3 black." The third man came back from the hall. He'd been looking at the back door. He nodded to the man at the counter. "You the only one working tonight, sweetheart?" Mashed potato face asked. "My boss is in the back." I lied. My boss, Sal, was at home, sleeping. The man's smile widened. He knew I was lying. "Right. Hey, you got a backup phone? Like a landline?" "It's broken," I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. "Just my cell." "And the cameras?" the one in the booth asked, gesturing to the little security dome in the corner. "That thing record." "I think so. Sal handles that." "Sal handles a lot." Mashed potato face grunted. They weren't here for coffee. They were checking the layout. They were looking for something, or someone. The bell chimed again. I almost jumped out of my skin. I thought, for one wild second, it was him again. The man in the suit. It was worse. 2 men in cheap rumpled suits that screamed government employee walked in. They had an air about them, an arrogant, lazy power. "Keely Hart," the taller one asked, reading my name tag with a smirk. "Yes." He flashed a badge. It was quick, too quick to read, but I saw the emblem. FOTB, Federal Organized Threats Bureau. I'd never even heard of them. "We're with the Federal Organized Threats Bureau," he said. Like that explained everything. "Just doing a routine check. Mind if we look at your sanitation license?" "It's on the wall," I said, pointing. The shorter one, who smelled like stale cigarettes, laughed. "Cute." He walked behind the counter, right into my space, and peered at the coffee machine. "This looks non-compliant. Grease trap looks full, too. We could shut you down for this, you know." "It's clean," I said, my voice shaking with anger now. Not just fear. "I cleaned it an hour ago." "That's what they all say." The tall one smirked. He leaned in close. The 3 thugs in the diner watched us, amused. "A violation like this, it could cost your boss his business. Unless you're willing to be cooperative." "Cooperative how?" The FOTB agent's eyes flicked to the phone on my hip. "We hear this diner gets interesting calls. Maybe you let us see your call log. Help us with an ongoing investigation." My blood ran cold. This wasn't about grease traps. This was about the phone call. About Obsidian Court. The 3 thugs were listening. The 2 FOTB agents were pressuring me. The diner, my little greasy sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage, and all the animals were inside. And then the bell chimed. The sound cut through the tension like a razor. Ernesto Serrano stepped inside. The rain had started up again, a fine, cold mist. He walked right through it. His black suit was still impossibly dark, but this time I saw the droplets clinging to his shoulders. He didn't seem to notice them. His eyes, those cold river eyes, did one slow, precise sweep of the room. They registered the 3 thugs. They registered the 2 FOTB agents. They registered me, trembling behind the counter. He saw every exit, every hand, every pocket that might hold a threat. He walked to the counter, right between the FOTB agents and me. He pulled a thick stack of cash from his inside pocket. It wasn't a 50. It was a brick of hundreds. bound by a simple black band. He dropped it on the counter. The sound was a dull, heavy thud. "Breakfast is on me," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the entire diner. The tall FOTB agent bristled. "Excuse me, sir, this is an official—" Ernesto didn't look at him. He looked at the room. "Everyone," he said, his voice dropping even lower, heavier, "leaves in 5 minutes." It wasn't a request. The shorter FOTB agent puffed up. "Who the hell do you think you are? We're federal." "You're not," Ernesto said simply. "Your credentials are fake. Your jurisdiction is non-existent, and your breath smells like cheap gin. You have 30 seconds to be outside before I call the real federal agents." The agent's face went pale. "And you three," Ernesto said, turning his head slightly toward the thugs. "Your boss, Oates, already knows the meat is off. You're cleaning up a mess that's already gone. Go." Mashed Potato Face started to stand up, his hand moving toward his jacket. A man I hadn't even seen enter a shadow that had detached itself from the kitchen doorway put a hand on his shoulder. The thug froze, his eyes wide. Another shadow stood by the front door. Ernesto hadn't come alone this time. The diner emptied. It was incredible. It wasn't violent. There wasn't a single punch thrown, not even a shove. It was just pressure. An overwhelming, silent presence that pushed them all out. The FOTB agents stumbled over each other. The 3 thugs practically ran to their truck, which peeled out onto the wet street. In less than a minute, it was just us again, me and him, and the sound of the rain. My knees gave out. I gripped the counter to stay upright. My breath was coming in short, painful gasps. I was terrified, and I was furious. "What did you do?" I whispered, the words ragged. "Who are you? They were going to shut us down. You brought this here." Ernesto Serrano stood there, the stack of money still sitting between us. He watched me for a long moment, his face unreadable. The silence stretched, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the buzz of the dying neon. He took a step closer. I flinched. He stopped. He spoke so softly, I had to strain to hear him, but his voice cut through my panic. "You gave me a lifeline," he said, nodding toward my phone, still clipped to my apron. "My turn." The stack of hundreds sat on the counter, looking obscene next to the jelly-stained tip jar. Ernesto Serrano was gone. His shadows were gone. The fake agents and the crew of thugs were gone. I was alone. But the diner didn't feel empty. It felt violated. The air was still vibrating with the pressure of what had just happened, of who he was. "You gave me a lifeline, my turn." What did that even mean? It sounded less like a rescue and more like a high-interest loan I never applied for. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the spatula to scrape the grill. The sizzle of the cleaning solution sounded too loud, too violent. I scrubbed until my knuckles were raw, trying to erase the last 2 hours, trying to erase the sight of those fake badges and the dead calm in Ernesto's eyes. Sal, my boss, would be in at 6 a.m. What was I supposed to tell him that a man who looked like he owned the city had used silent authority to empty his diner? That I'd let him? I looked at the money. It was more than my monthly rent. I grabbed the stack, folded it once, and shoved it deep into the pocket of my jeans. It felt heavy, like a stolen rock. I finished my closing duties on autopilot, mopped the floor, restocked the napkins, turned off the coffee machine. I locked the front door at 5:05 a.m., just as the sky was turning a sick, bruised purple over the Graybridge skyline. The rain had finally let up, leaving the streets slick and gleaming, reflecting the sickly orange streetlights. Baythorn Street was a 10-block walk. Usually, I'd put in my earbuds, but not tonight. Tonight. Every sound was a threat. The hiss of a bus's air brakes, the clatter of a metal trash can lid, the distant wail of a siren. I was halfway down the 3rd block when I felt it. It wasn't a sound, it was a presence. A low, thrumming rumble that didn't belong to the usual city noise. I glanced over my shoulder. A sedan. It was painted a deep crimson, a color that looked black in the dim light. It was cruising slowly, maybe 20 yards back. My heart, which had just started to slow down, kicked back into high gear. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a car. I turned right onto Glover Street, a shortcut through a commercial alley. The sedan turned right. The alley was narrow, smelling of wet cardboard and old fry grease. My sneakers slapped against the pavement. I didn't run, but I walked fast. The car's engine noise echoed between the brick walls. It never sped up, never got closer, just stayed. I emerged onto Baythorn, my street. I chanced another look. The crimson sedan was parked at the mouth of the alley, just watching. I fumbled with the keys to my building, my fingers stiff and cold. I jammed the key into the main door, shoved it open, and slammed it behind me. I listened, my back pressed to the wood, for the sound of the door opening again. Nothing, just the wheeze of the ancient radiator in the hall. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, 3B. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath burning in my lungs. My door was locked. Exactly as I'd left it, I sighed, leaning my forehead against the peeling paint. See, Keely paranoid. I unlocked the deadbolt, pushed the door open, and froze. It smelled wrong. It smelled like stale, unfamiliar cologne and the metallic scent of wet metal. My little studio apartment was tiny, a bed, a dresser, a kitchenette, a card table. I knew every square inch of it. Someone had been here. It wasn't a violent toss. It wasn't like on TV. It was subtle. The single drawer of my dresser was pulled open about an inch. The cushion on my armchair was slightly crooked. My mattress, when I looked closely, was a fraction of an inch off its box spring. They hadn't been looking for money. I didn't have any. They had been searching. Gently. Carefully. A message. My eyes scanned the room and landed on the card table. There it was. A photograph. A small, square Polaroid. Sal had taken it last Christmas, when I'd worn a stupid reindeer antler headband and was holding up the cherry pie I'd baked. In the photo, I was smiling. A real, genuine smile. It was placed perfectly in the center of the table. They were telling me they knew where I lived. They knew what I looked like. They knew where I worked. My legs gave out and I slid down the wall to sit on the worn linoleum floor. The money in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my leg. My phone, the one Ernesto had used, buzzed on my hip. I pulled it out, an unknown number, a text message. My fingers were numb as I opened it. Your phone, 2:17 a.m. Don't break it. 2:17 a.m. I checked the call log. That was the exact time. The exact minute Ernesto Serrano had made his call. Obsidian Court moves the hour. They knew. They knew I was the one who'd given him the phone. They didn't just know where I was. They knew what I'd done. Before I could even process the text, the phone rang. Blocked, the screen flashed. I stared at it. Every instinct screamed, throw it. Throw the phone against the wall. Run. I answered. Hello? My voice was a reedy whisper. Keely. Ernesto. His voice was exactly as I remembered. Calm, low, and completely devoid of panic. It made my own panic feel childish. They were here, I hissed. They were in my apartment. How did they find me? They followed you from the diner, he said, as if stating the weather. The crimson sedan. My blood went cold. You knew they were following me and you let them. I needed to confirm they were watching you, he said. Now I know. Listen to me very carefully. You have a roll-up bag for your diner tools, spatulas, thermometers. My cutlery bag, it's in my locker at the diner. No, he said. The one you take home, the one in your backpack. I looked at my backpack, slumped by the door. I always kept a spare set, just in case. Check the canvas lining, near the zipper, he ordered. I crawled over to the bag, my heart a cold stone. I unzipped it, pushing aside a spatula and an offset knife. I felt along the seam. Nothing. It's not, then my finger brushed against it, a small, hard disc, no bigger than a quarter, stitched into the fabric. They planted it. I breathed. At the diner, those thugs. They're thorough, he said. I need you to meet me now. No, I said, the anger finally boiling over the fear. No, I'm done. You brought this to me. You and your obsidian court. You clear my diner and now my apartment is being searched. No, leave me alone." There was a pause, not an angry one, a patient one. "Deck 7, he said. "The parking garage on Mariner Street. Top level, 10 minutes. Come alone." "Are you listening to me?" I said no. "They think you're working with me, Keely. They think you're my associate. Leaving you alone right now is the most dangerous thing I could do. 10 minutes. The line clicked dead. I sat on the floor, shaking with a rage that was so deep it tasted like metal. He wasn't asking. He was telling. I stood up. My reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror looked pathetic, pale, scared, eyes too wide. Fine. He wants a meeting. He'll get one. I grabbed the can of pepper spray from my keychain. Then I walked to the kitchenette, opened the wooden knife block, and pulled out the sharpest, smallest paring knife. I slid it into the sleeve of my hoodie. I was going to deck 7, but I wasn't going to listen. I was going to tell him no to his face. The top level of deck 7 was empty, windswept and cold. The wind howled through the concrete pillars, carrying the distant sound of the port. Below us, Graybridge was a carpet of glittering, indifferent lights. He was there, just him. He was leaning against a dark sedan that was probably worth more than my entire apartment building. He wasn't in the suit anymore. He wore dark jeans and a heavy wool coat, but he still looked impossibly sharp, impossibly contained. He wasn't looking at me as I climbed the final ramp. He was looking out over the city. My hand was in my pocket, gripping the pepper spray. The knife was cold against my forearm. "I'm not helping you," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady in the wind. He turned. His face was shadowed. I know. He didn't make any sudden moves. He just reached into his coat pocket and tossed a small, clear plastic bag onto the hood of his car. It slid a few inches and stopped. "They're sloppy," he said. I stepped closer, cautiously. Inside the zip-top bag were 2 items, a small, black disc identical to the one I just cut out of my bag, and one of the FOTB badges the agents had flashed at the diner. "They dropped this," he said, nodding at the badge, "in their haste. You said they were thorough, now they're sloppy. They're thorough when they're hunting, they're sloppy when they're running," he said. He looked at me, his eyes catching the distant city light. "Your phone call, Keely, at 2:17 a.m. It wasn't just a call. It was a digital key. They had a trap set on a specific number, a dead drop. They expected me to use one of my own phones, which they are monitoring. When I used yours, a clean, civilian phone, it bypassed their trap. It triggered a different protocol. It exposed them." He stepped away from the car, keeping his hands visible. "The Red Harbor Syndicate, that's who they are. They've been trying to corner me for months. Now, thanks to you, they're exposed, and they're angry. They don't think you're a waitress who lent a stranger her phone. They think you're my hanger, my associate." "A hanger?" I spat the word. "I'm a waitress. I serve coffee and burnt toast. I don't need a mafia bodyguard." The word mafia hung in the air between us. He didn't flinch. "No," he said, his voice quiet. You need the truth." I wrapped my arms around myself. The wind was biting. "The truth, what truth? That you've painted a target on my back." "The target was already there," he said. "You just didn't know it. The Red Harbor Syndicate is hunting for an encrypted drive, a drive I acquired. They've been flooding this city with their people, trying to find me, trying to find it." He paused, letting it sink in. "The men in your diner tonight, the fake agents, that was them. That was Red Harbor, the one at the counter. Mashed potato face, as you probably call him. His name is Oates." The name hit me like a physical blow, Oates. My mind flashed back, not just tonight, weeks ago, a month ago, a big, beefy man with a loud voice and piggy eyes. "Oates," I whispered. "He comes in every Tuesday, orders the lumberjack special, extra bacon, always complains the eggs are too runny. He knows me. The abstract threat, the men in suits, the helicopter, it all collapsed into one. Terrifying. Concrete fact, the man who'd just had my apartment searched was a man I had served coffee to. He's been watching the diner, Ernesto stated, watching all of you, looking for a way in. Your phone call just accelerated his timeline. I felt sick. So what now? You take them out. You do whatever it is you do. I protect my assets, he said. I'm not your asset. You are, he said, and the finality in his voice shut me up. You are, until Red Harbor is handled, whether you like it or not. He walked to the concrete ledge of the garage and placed a small, black flip phone on it, a burner. My number is the only one in it. They will be listening to your phone. Don't use it for anything except calling the police if you have to. Use this if you need me. I stared at the phone. Taking it was a choice. It was stepping over a line. I won't, I said. Ernesto nodded, as if he expected it. That's your choice. He turned to leave. His hand was on the car door when he stopped. Keely, he said, looking back at me. The wind ruffled his hair. If you still want to work tonight, if you go back to that diner for the evening shift. What? Wear a thick coat. He got in his car. The engine started with a low, expensive growl. He was gone in seconds, leaving me alone on the roof with the wind and the burner phone. I walked back to my apartment. The door was still open, the room still smelling of the intruder. I sat on the floor, the Polaroid of my smiling face in one hand, the paring knife in the other. The burner phone was heavy in my coat pocket. I listened to the rain start to fall again. Ticking against my window, I was trapped. I was on the edge of a world I didn't understand, and the only person offering me a hand was the man who'd pushed me off the ledge. I sat on my floor until my legs went numb. The cheap plastic of the burner phone was cold in my hand. Ernesto's warning. Wear a thick coat echoed in my head. It wasn't advice, it was a threat assessment. But fear doesn't pay bills. Rent for my room on Baythorn was still due. The cash Ernesto had left the 50 this morning. The brick of hundreds I hadn't even counted felt like poison. I couldn't use it. Using it meant I was part of whatever this was. It meant I was bought. So I went to work. I put on my thickest hoodie under my thin work jacket. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I felt like I was wearing tissue paper armor to go serve pancakes. The 6 o'clock rush at the Comet was chaos, but it was the good kind, the normal kind. The air was hot and thick with grill smoke, sizzling onions, and the sweet smell of brewing coffee. Every booth was full. A group of bikers, weekend riders, mostly harmless, were laughing too loudly in the corner booth. A line of truck drivers nursed their mugs at the counter. A young couple in booth 4 was having a whispered, intense argument, probably about money. It was loud, it was familiar, it was sane. For almost an hour, I lost myself in it. I was just Keely. I refilled coffees, yelled order up to Sal in the kitchen, flirted with the bikers for a better tip. The terror of the morning, the crimson sedan, the man in my apartment, it all receded. It felt like a paranoid dream. The tinny bell above the door chimed. Be right with you, I called out, balancing 3 plates on my arm. We're not here to eat, sweetheart. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid. I set the plates down very, very slowly on the counter. It was Oates, mashed potato face. He wasn't in his usual grubby work clothes. He wore a stained, cheap windbreaker. And he wasn't alone. The man beside him was a monster. He must have been 6'5", built like an industrial refrigerator, with a flat, empty face that looked like it had never smiled. The happy, chaotic noise of the diner died. It didn't stop, but it dipped. As if someone had turned down the volume on the whole world, the bikers stopped laughing. The truck drivers looked up. Oates, I said. I was proud of my voice. It barely shook. Lumberjack special eggs over easy. He let out a wet, ugly laugh. She's a smart one. We're here on official business. He slapped a laminated card on the counter. It was the FOTB logo, just like the fake ones from the morning. Federal Organized Threats Bureau. We got a report of unauthorized communication signals originating from this diner. We need to check all electronic devices. starting with the phones. "You were here this morning," I said, my voice dropping to a hiss. "Those badges were fake." "These are real," the giant beside him mumbled. He took a step forward, his bulk blocking the main aisle. Sal pushed through the kitchen doors, wiping his grease-stained hands on his apron. "What's the problem here? Fellas, you're bothering my customers." "The problem," Oates said, leaning onto the counter, "is we need to see this diner's phone, and hers." He pointed a thick finger at me. "We have reason to believe she's been cooperating with a known fugitive. We want to see her call log." "I want to see a warrant," Sal said, crossing his arms. Oates' smile was pure malice. "This is the warrant. Now give us the phone, or we shut you down. For good." The air crackled. The couple in booth 4 was sliding out, fumbling with their wallets. The giant took a step toward them, and they froze. "That won't be necessary." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the greasy air like a razor. Ernesto Serrano was standing right behind Oates. He hadn't come through the door. He must have slipped in from the kitchen or been waiting in the back. He was back in a suit, a dark, perfect charcoal gray. He looked like a billionaire CEO who had taken a very wrong turn, except for the absolute, chilling certainty in his eyes. He moved. It was a single, fluid motion. He didn't push Oates. He simply occupied the space between us. He was at the counter, facing me. It forced Oates to either ignore him or turn his back on me. Oates turned. His piggy eyes went wide with a mix of shock and hatred. "You—" "Me," Ernesto agreed. He unclasped his watch from his left wrist. It was a heavy, beautiful silver timepiece, intricate and clearly expensive. He placed it gently on the laminate counter, right next to the salt shaker. "You're disrupting her shift." "This is FOTB business," Oates blustered, but his voice had lost its edge. He was trying to reestablish control. "We are federal agents." "Are you?" Ernesto said. He didn't raise his voice. He looked at his watch. He tapped the crown. It wasn't a gentle tap. He pressed it, a deliberate, final click. For one long second, nothing happened. Then a sound. Not one sound, but 20. Every single phone in the diner buzzed at the same time. It was a horrible, vibrating chorus. The bikers fumbled for their pockets. The truck drivers grabbed their phones from the counter. The couple in the booth jumped. "What the hell?" one of the bikers yelled, staring at his screen. "Emergency alert. Comet Diner closing for immediate gas leak. Please evacuate immediately." "Mine says emergency maintenance," the woman in booth 4 said, her voice high with panic. "Mine too." Before the confusion could curdle into a stampede, the front door opened. 2 men in crispy black polo shirts stepped inside. They had no logo, but they moved with an authority that was absolute. "Apologies, everyone," the first man said, his voice a calm, professional baritone. "We have a critical maintenance issue. For your safety, we must ask you to clear the building immediately." "All meals are complimentary," the second man added, already holding the door. "Please accept your refund on the way out." It was seamless. It was brilliant. People grumbled about their food, but the combination of a phone alert and the polite, firm insistence of the men in black polos was irresistible. They started to file out. Ernesto's people were polite, efficient, guiding people, handing $20 bills to the customers as they left. They weren't bouncers. They were event managers. Oates was frozen. He was staring at Ernesto, his small brain finally connecting the dots. "This is you. You did this." The diner was emptying fast, soon. It was just me, Sal, Oates, the giant, Ernesto, and his 2 men. "The diner is cleared," Ernesto said. "You should leave." "Not without the phone," Oates snarled, and he moved. He didn't go for Ernesto, and he went for me. His big, meaty hand shot across the counter and clamped around my wrist like a steel trap. I screamed, a short, sharp gasp, the pepper spray in my pocket, the knife in my hoodie sleeve. They were useless. "Waya." Ernesto didn't punch him. He didn't even raise his hand. His left hand moved in a blur. He didn't grab Oates' wrist. He cupped his elbow from underneath and placed his other hand on the back of Oates' shoulder. And he leaned, just slightly. A pained, wet grunt tore out of Oates' throat. His face went white. His own grip on my wrist became a torture device, his joints locking in a way they weren't supposed to. It was a soft, simple, anatomical movement, and it brought the much larger man to his knees. My wrist was free. My shoulder, he wheezed. The giant finally reacted. He was fast for a big man. A folding knife appeared in his hand, the blade snapping out with a lethal click. He never even took a step. A third man was suddenly there. I hadn't seen him enter. He wasn't one of the men in polos. He was tall, thin, and wore a black hoodie. His face shadowed. He looked like a ghost. He moved like one. He didn't block the knife. He didn't grab the giant's arm. He moved inside the giant's guard. His fingers, precise as a surgeon's, struck the hinge of the open blade. There was a sharp, metallic snap. The blade of the knife separated from the handle. It clattered to the linoleum. The giant stared at the empty handle in his hand, his brain completely short-circuited. The man in the hoodie, who I would later learn was Anton Hex, didn't even look at the giant. He just looked at Ernesto, awaiting orders. Ernesto released the pressure on Oates. The big man scrambled back, clutching his arm, his face slick with sweat. The last customer was gone. One of Ernesto's men locked the front door. The buzzing neon sea outside flickered and went dark. They'd cut the power to the sign. The diner was dead silent, except for the hum of the freezer. Ernesto looked at Sal, who was frozen by the kitchen door, then at Oates, then at me. "I paid for everyone's breakfast this morning," Ernesto said, his voice echoing in the quiet. "Now, I'm paying for her safety." I was pressed against the pie display, my entire body vibrating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw a coffee pot at all of them. At Oates, at the giant, at Ernesto. But as I watched Oates and his partner back away toward the door, their faces pale with humiliation and fear, I understood. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a statement. The first time he cleared the diner, he was cleaning up his own mess. This time was for me. The thought was more terrifying than Oates' knife. Oates fumbled with the locked door. Hex unlocked it from the inside and held it open for them, a gesture of chilling, mundane politeness. They stumbled out into the night. The diner was silent, just me, a stunned Sal, Ernesto, and the ghost named Hex. "Keely," Sal stammered. "What in God's name?" "Go home, Sal," Ernesto said, his voice gentle. "My associate is waiting outside. He will explain there was a small, contained kitchen fire. He will compensate you for the lost night's business, plus damages. Your job is safe, Keely." Sal looked at me, then at Ernesto, then at the knife blade on the floor. He nodded. Once, and walked out the back. Ernesto turned to me. I was still breathing hard. You can't just do this," I stammered. "This is Sal's diner. This is my job." "Oates won't be back," he said. "Not here. They will escalate." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card. It was matte black, made of thick, heavy cardstock. The only thing on it, in simple, elegant white font, was an address, the Serrano House, Ardent Key. "Come with me," he said. "It's the only place you'll be safe tonight." I looked at the card. I looked at him. No. The word came out stronger than I felt. "I'm not going to your mafia house. I'm not one of you." He studied my face for a long second. He didn't look angry. He almost looked impressed. He nodded slowly. "All right." He reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a small, old-fashioned key, a key for a locker or a small safe. He placed it on the counter. "You won't come to my house? Fine." He slid the key toward me. "But you'll still need the truth." I stared at the key. "The wall clock," he said, gesturing to the big, ugly 1970s era clock above the kitchen door. "It's been busted for 3 years. The hands don't move." "I know," I said. "Sal just likes how it looks." "It's not a clock," Ernesto said. "It's a motion-activated camera. Sal put it in after he was robbed 2 years ago. The footage feeds to a mini safe in his office. That's the key. My stomach dropped. How do you know that? It's my business to know, he said simply. You think you got dragged into this at 2:17 a.m. when I borrowed your phone? You're wrong. He tapped the key. Go watch the footage. Timestamp 2:11 a.m. 6 minutes before I walked in here. Watch it, then you can curse me. He and Hex turned and walked to the door. Wait, I called out. He stopped, his hand on the door. The coat, I said, my voice small. You told me to wear a thick coat. Why? Ernesto looked at the knife blade still gleaming on the floor, because I knew they wouldn't just use their words this time, and I wasn't sure I'd make it in time. The bell chimed. They were gone. I stood there, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. The key? I ran to Sal's tiny office. The mini safe was exactly where he said it would be, bolted to the floor under the desk. The key slid in. Inside was a small, digital video recorder. I hit play on the tiny screen. I rewound, my fingers clumsy, until the timestamp read 2:10 a.m. The diner was empty, just me, at the far end of the counter, wiping it down. At 2:11 a.m., the back door opened. It was Oates. He wasn't a customer. When he was sneaking in, when he looked around, saw I was busy at the front, and moved quickly to the alcove by the industrial coffee machine. He looked right at the camera. He didn't know it was there. He knelt down and taped a small, padded envelope to the back of the machine, hidden from view. He checked his watch, then slipped back out the door. My breath caught. 6 minutes later, 2:17 a.m., the bell chimed. Ernesto Serrano walked in. He asked for my phone. He made the call. Obsidian Court moves the hour. It wasn't a coincidence. Oates was using the diner as a dead drop. Ernesto knew. He hadn't just bypassed a trap with my phone. He'd stolen their package. I was in the middle. I had been in the middle, long before I ever saw his face. He hadn't dragged me in. He had just been the first one to tell me I was already drowning. I ran out of the office, back to my hoodie on the hook. I fumbled in the pocket for the burner phone. The cold, cheap plastic felt heavy. It felt like a choice. I flipped it open and pressed the only number in its contacts. He picked up on the first ring. Serrano. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the smell of burnt coffee and fear filling my lungs. All right, I said, my voice low and hard. I'm listening. The line was silent, but I could hear his breathing, measured, waiting. Where? I asked, my voice flat. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'll be there in 3 minutes. The line went dead. 3 minutes. Not I'll leave now. 3 minutes. He was already close. He'd been waiting for my call. The realization that he knew I'd watched the video, that he'd anticipated my reaction, sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I locked the back door. I locked Sal's office. I went to the front, flipped the closed sign, and shot the deadbolt. The Comet Diner, my greasy, fluorescent-lit sanctuary, was now my prison. I stood by the front window, peering through the blinds, past the reflection of my own pale face. The street was empty. The rain had stopped. 2 minutes and 45 seconds later, the dark sedan he'd used at Deck 7 glided to the curb. It didn't make a sound. The passenger door swung open, pushed from the inside. He was driving, alone. I took one last look at the diner, at the overturned chairs from the evacuation, at the half-eaten plate of fries, at the knife blade gleaming on the floor. I wiped my hands on my apron, unhooked it, and threw it on the counter. I walked out. I didn't run. I walked, slid into the leather passenger seat, and pulled the door shut. The heavy thunk sounded final. He didn't say anything. He just pulled away from the curb. The car was spotless inside. It smelled like expensive leather and something clean and metallic, like the air after a thunderstorm. We drove through the awakening city, the sky that bruised purple color I knew so well. But I'd never seen it from inside a car like this. The suspension was so good I couldn't even feel the potholes on Glover Street. You knew, I said to the windshield. You knew Oates planted that package. I knew Red Harbor was using the diner as a dead drop. He corrected, his voice calm. He didn't take his eyes off the road. I didn't know who the inside man was until Oates showed up this morning. I didn't know the when until I saw him sneak in. You saw him, you were there. Across the street, in the roofing supply lot, my presence triggered his timeline. He was supposed to make the drop at 3 a.m., but he got spooked. He planted it early. Then I walked in. And used my phone to blow it all up. And used your phone, he agreed. We drove toward Ardent Key, the old industrial district by the river. The warehouses were dark skeletons against the dawn. I expected him to pull up to some high-tech fortress or a gated mansion on the hill. He didn't. He turned into an alley, tapped a remote, and a huge corrugated steel door groaned open. He drove into a massive, dark space, and the door rolled shut behind us, plunging us into total blackness before the lights clicked on. It was a warehouse, but it wasn't the Serrano house, not the one I'd pictured. I stepped out of the car. The air was warm and smelled like old brick, fresh ground coffee and paper, thousands of books. The place was enormous. The ceilings had to be 50 feet high, crisscrossed with steel beams. One entire wall was exposed brick, floor to ceiling. Another was a massive, industrial paned window looking out onto the dark, churning river. But the space was cozy. Pools of warm, yellow light came from antique floor lamps. Deep leather sofas were grouped around a modern, concrete fireplace, and shelves. Bookshelves lined half the warehouse, stuffed with everything from hardcovers to old paperbacks. And in the corner, dominating the space, was an industrial, 6-group espresso machine, a professional setup. Next to it were grinders, bags of beans, and a stack of clean, white ceramic cups. "This is your house?" I asked, my voice small. "This is where I work," he said. He was already shrugging out of his suit jacket, revealing a simple black button-down shirt. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like an architect working a late night. Hex was there, the man from the diner. He emerged from a shadow, nodded once at Ernesto, and then at me. He was still in his black hoodie, and his eyes, they were a startling, pale blue. He looked like a wolf. He disappeared up a metal spiral staircase without a word. "Coffee?" Ernesto asked, already moving toward the machine. "I just got off a shift. I'm drowning in coffee." "You're drowning in adrenaline," he corrected. "You need to eat, and you need to talk." He didn't make me an espresso. He ground beans, set up a pour-over. His movements as precise and economical as when he'd taken Oates down. He moved to a small, stainless steel kitchen and came back with a plate of thick-cut bread and a small pot of jam. He set it all on a massive, reclaimed wood table in the center of the room. A map of Graybridge was unrolled on it, held down at the corners by heavy, metal objects. "Sit," he said. It was still in order, but it was softer now. I sat. I was too tired to stand. I ate a piece of bread. It was the best bread I'd ever had. Ernesto stood opposite me, sipping his coffee. "The Red Harbor Syndicate," he said, tapping the map. "They move product through the ports. Oates was their beachhead, a low-level enforcer tasked with simple logistics, like using your diner as a P.O. box, but now they're exposed." He pointed to the map. "Their route is predictable. They run contraband from Pier 14. He tapped a spot on the docks. "Up the Mariner Bridge and into the city distributor on the west side. They do it in city-owned garbage trucks, between 3 and 5 a.m. He spoke in structures, logistics, routes, timetables. It was cold. "That's wrong," I said. Ernesto stopped, and he looked at me, one eyebrow raised slightly. "The Mariner Bridge," I said, pointing with a crumb-covered finger. "The city's been doing construction on the northbound lane for 6 months. It's a bottleneck. Any truck driver in the city knows you avoid it. You'd cross at the Glover Bridge, down by the old stockyards. It's faster. Less cops." I took another bite of bread, the jam sweet on my tongue. "And they don't use garbage trucks. Not for the real stuff. The drivers talk. They all come to the diner. The garbage truck drivers, the bread delivery guys, the city utility workers. The garbage crews are too lazy. They'd never agree to an extra off-books pickup. It's the bread trucks, specifically Martino's Bakery. Ernesto stared at me. That calm river ice gaze was fixed on my face. Martino's? Their driver is a guy named Vic. He's always jumpy, always paying in cash, always leaves a 20% tip even when the coffee's burnt. He's either in love with my coworker, Zoe, or he's dirty. And he's not in love with Zoe. He smells like cheap cigars, and he never makes eye contact. He parks his truck in the alley behind the diner every night at 4:15 a.m., stays for exactly 10 minutes. Then he hits the road, right over the Glover Bridge. A slow smile touched the corner of Ernesto's mouth. It was a tiny, unsettling thing. "You're good." "I'm a waitress," I said, my old anger returning. "I'm paid to be good. I read people like I read a menu. I know who wants the check before they ask. I know who's going to complain about the temperature, and I know who's a dirty truck driver using my diner as a cover." He doesn't think in structure, and I thought, looking at his map, he thinks in lines. I think in people. The synergy, the connection was sudden and sharp. He had the what. I had the who and how. I put the bread down. "Okay, so I told you what I know. What now? What's the plan?" "We build the board," he said. He turned to a huge whiteboard I hadn't noticed, hidden in an alcove. For the next hour, we worked. We felt strange, but that's what it was. He wrote oats in the center. I added fake Fotby and drew a line. "They're the same," I said. "The tall one from this morning, I've seen him with oats. They came in 2 weeks ago." Ernesto drew a larger circle around both and wrote Red Harbor Syndicate. "The package," he said. "The drive. It was a crypto key, a wallet." He wrote Teacup 47 on the board. Red Harbor's main slush fund. Oats wasn't just moving product. He was moving their entire bank account. "And you took it," I whispered. "I intercepted it. And now they want it back, and they think I helped you." "They don't think," he said. "They know. You're compromised. Keely, completely." I leaned against the table, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving me hollow. "So what does that mean I go into witness protection?" I run. "It means you stay where I can see you," he said, "until this is finished." I straightened up. This was it, the line. "No, I'm not your prisoner, and I'm not your hanger. If I do this, if I help you, I have rules." He turned fully to face me. "Rules. 1, I said, holding up a finger. No one is taken out, not in front of me. I don't want to see it. I won't be a part of that. Oats, the giant you use your soft holds, or whatever that was. But no one gets permanently hurt where I can see." He nodded. "Acceptable." 2, my friends, my coworkers, Sal and Zoe Park. She's my best friend. She's not like me. She's soft. You will not let this touch them. They are to be kept so far out of this they don't even know it's happening. Especially Zoe. Do you understand me? "Zoe Park," he repeated, as if memorizing the name. "They will not be touched. Agreed." He walked to a closet by the door and pulled something off a hanger. He threw it to me. It was a leather jacket, not a heavy biker jacket, but a thin, beautifully soft, dark brown leather jacket. It was stylish, cut for a woman. "It's not bulletproof," he said as I held it, "but the lining is a Kevlar weave. It's cut resistant. Oats went for your wrist. The giant pulled a knife. They won't make that mistake twice." "It's not for looks." I finished for him, quoting his thick coat warning. I slid it on. It fit perfectly. It was warm. "One more thing," I said, zipping it up. "This Obsidian Court, that's you. Right, you're just another gang, another Red Harbor." He was silent for a long moment. He walked to the great window, looking out at the river. "Obsidian Court has rules," he said, his back to me. "The Red Harbor Syndicate deals in anything that makes money. They traffic in narcotics, they traffic in weapons, they traffic in people. They don't care about fallout. They don't care about collateral damage." He turned around. His eyes, those cold, calm eyes, were burning. "My organization has rules. We do not touch human trafficking. We do not involve minors. Ever. and we do not harm civilians." He didn't need to swear. He didn't need to cross his heart. The way he said it, the absolute ironclad certainty in his voice, I believed him. I believed him completely. In his eyes, I saw something I didn't expect. Not darkness, but a shadow. The shadow of a man who had seen things, maybe done things that forced him to create these rules. It was the look of a man who was atoning for something. A long time ago. The drive I took, and he said, wasn't just their money. It was their trafficking ledger. The names, the routes, the children. My stomach turned to ice. Children. Red Harbor doesn't care. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse flickered. They didn't go out, just buzzed and dimmed, then surged back. Hex appeared on the spiral staircase. He didn't say anything. He just held up 2 fingers. "A tail," Ernesto said, his entire body shifting. He wasn't the calm architect anymore. He was the man from the diner. His hand went to his hip, resting on I hadn't even seen it, a weapon, holstered perfectly under his shirt. My heart hammered in my chest, but it was different this time. It wasn't just fear. It was something else. A strange, electric feeling, watching him stand between me and the dark. "They followed you," I whispered. "No," Ernesto said. "They were watching the building. They just saw you arrive. They know you're with me." He looked at Hex. "Sweep. Confirm." Hex vanished. Ernesto turned back to me. The moment of danger had passed, but the air was still thick with it. "You can't go back to your apartment. You can't go back to the diner, not alone." "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice shaky. "We wait here until they break down the door." "No," he said. "They've shown their hand. Now we reverse the play." He looked at the whiteboard, at Oats and Comet Diner. "Tomorrow," he said, "we turn the diner into a stage. We're going to use Oats to expose the real FOTB mole, and we're going to do it on your turf." He was sending me back. I was the bait. He must have seen the look on my face. "You won't be alone. Not for a second, but they trust you. They see you as a weak link. We'll let them think that. Right up until the moment the trap springs." He walked me back to the car. "I'm taking you somewhere safe, a different location. You'll stay there tonight." We were at the car door. He stood in front of me, close. Close enough for me to smell the coffee on his breath. "Are you afraid of me?" Keely, he asked. His voice was low. I had to be honest. "No. I'm afraid of what you drag along with you. I'm afraid of this." I gestured to the warehouse, the map, the implied threat outside. I looked him right in the eye. "Are you afraid of me?" He was silent for a beat. He studied my face, as if he were memorizing it. "Yes," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Afraid I'll get you hurt?" "No," Ernesto said. He opened the car door for me. "I'm afraid you're right." The safe house wasn't a house. It was a sterile, high-floor apartment in a glass tower that had no name on the directory. It had beige furniture, hotel art, and no personality. It was the last place anyone would look for me, or, I suspected, for him. I slept for 3 hours on a couch that felt like it was still wrapped in plastic, and woke up to him shaking my shoulder. "It's time," he said. Time was 5 a.m. The sky was still black. "My car is still at the diner," I mumbled. "Hex brought it here an hour ago," he said, holding out my own car keys. "It's clean." Of course he did. Now, I was driving my own beat-up 12-year-old hatchback, and Ernesto Serrano was sitting in the passenger seat. The absurdity was staggering. My car rattled when it idled. The check engine light was a permanent feature, and the passenger seat had a spring that dug into your back if you sat wrong. He didn't seem to notice. He just sat there, in his dark jeans and that same wool coat from the garage, looking at the city as it passed. He was navigating. "Left here, right on Wharfman's. We're going to the Misty Shore Market." "The fish market?" I asked, gripping the wheel. "It doesn't open for another hour." "Exactly hour," he said. "The loading bays behind it are where Red Harbor's people swap inventory. Vic, your bakery driver, drops his empty trays there and picks up other things." My stomach was a cold knot. This was happening too fast. Yesterday, I was worried about rent. Today, I was driving a Mafia Boss on a stakeout in my 2012 hatchback. The leather jacket he'd given me felt heavy on my shoulders. A costume I hadn't asked to wear. We pulled onto the cobblestone streets of the market. It was dead quiet, save for the lapping of the river water against the pylons and the cry of a lone seagull. The air was thick with the smell of low tide, salt and diesel. "Pull in there," he gets, "behind that stack of lobster traps." I cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "We wait," I whispered. "We wait." We didn't wait long. A minute later, a dark blue utility van, the kind electricians use, turned into the service road. It didn't drive past. It stopped, blocking the only way out. "Ernesto," I said, my hand instinctively going for the gear shift. "Stay calm," he said, his voice level. He wasn't looking at the van. He was looking at the side mirrors. The passenger door of the van slid open. A man hopped out. He was holding something. A white cardboard box, about the size of a shoebox. He grinned, an ugly, gap-toothed expression, and tossed it onto the hood of my car. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he yelled. My blood turned to ice. It was a birthday cake. A bomb. I screamed. I didn't mean to. It was just a raw, animal sound. I threw the car into reverse. "No!" Ernesto yelled. "Forward into the alley now!" The alley. Glover Alley, my shortcut. It was barely wide enough for my car. I didn't think. I jammed the shifter into drive, cranked the wheel, and slammed my foot on the accelerator. My tires screamed on the wet cobblestones. We shot forward, scraping the side view mirror against a brick wall. The box on the hood slid, but stayed on. "It's a bomb," I shrieked, my eyes locked on it. "It's going to—" "It's not a bomb," he said, his voice tight with command. "It's a drone. Stop the car. Hard." I was in the middle of the alley. I stomped on the brake. The car skidded, the anti-lock brakes stuttering, and we slammed to a halt, throwing us both forward against our seatbelts. Before the car had even settled, Ernesto's door was open. The white box had flown off the hood and was hovering. 4 small propellers had snapped out, and it was whining, a high-pitched, insectile sound. A small, red light on its front was aimed right at us. Ernesto didn't hesitate. His hand shot out, not to swat it, but to catch it. He grabbed it mid-air, a move so fast and precise it defied belief. He took 2 steps, spun, and smashed it against the concrete pillar of an old fire escape. There was no explosion, just a sharp crack, a shower of plastic, and a spray of blue sparks. The red light died. I was breathing like I'd just run a mile. My heart felt like it was going to punch its way out of my chest. A car door slammed at the end of the alley. They were coming. "Out," Ernesto said. He grabbed my arm, pulling me out the driver's side. "This way." He dragged me behind a massive, rusted steel dumpster that was overflowing with rotten fish guts. The smell was overwhelming, a physical assault. We crouched down, our backs against the cold, wet brick, hidden in the deep shadows. I was shaking. Not from the cold, from the adrenaline. I pressed my forehead against my knees, trying to get my breath back. "They're gone," he whispered. I heard the sound of the van's engine roaring as it sped away. They weren't coming in. They just wanted to tag us. "Breathe, Keely," he said. "I am breathing." I gasped, the air thick with the smell of fish. We were close, too close. My shoulder was pressed against his. His thigh was braced against mine. I could feel the solid warmth of him through my jeans and his coat. I turned my head, still gasping, and my face was inches from his. I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the small, pale scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He was watching me, his eyes intense. He was chewing something. Slowly. "Is that gum?" I whispered, incredulous. "Mint," he said. His breath puffed out, and he was right. Mint. In the middle of this chaos, surrounded by rotting fish. He smelled like mint and wool. The moment stretched. My heart was still hammering, but for a split second, it wasn't just fear. It was something else. This proximity, this shared, stolen silence. I was suddenly intensely aware of the pulse beating in his throat. I pulled back, breaking the spell. They know where we are. They know we're here, he corrected. Standing up, he offered me a hand. I ignored it and pushed myself up, my legs wobbly. They wanted to track us. Now they're blind, but they know who we're looking for. He nodded toward the loading bay. Vic, Quill's garage. That's where he clocks out. Let's go. Quill's garage was on the other side of the district, a low, concrete building that looked abandoned. My car, with its scraped mirror, felt conspicuous. But Ernesto directed me to park 3 blocks away. We walked. Hex materialized from a doorway as we approached, gave a single nod, and then melted back into the shadows to watch the street. The side door to the garage was locked. Ernesto didn't pick it. He used a thin piece of metal from his wallet to slide the bolt, and we were inside in less than 5 seconds. It was dark, smelling of oil, old tires, and stale beer. A single, bare bulb lit a small, filthy office in the back. Vic's not here, I whispered. He doesn't have to be, Ernesto said. He walked straight to a metal locker, ignored the padlock, and just tore the latch off with a grunt of effort. Empty. He moved to the next one, and the next. What are we... Here, he said. He was at the last locker, the one marked Oates. He'd found a small, metal strongbox, the kind you buy at an office supply store, bolted to the bottom shelf. That's it, I said. It's tiny. It's not for drugs, he said. He was examining the lock. He'll be here soon. We need to go. Just break it, I said, my patience gone. It's reinforced, he said. It'll make noise. Hex is watching, but... I looked at the box, then at the grimy desk, a phone, an old rotary-style landline, an internal line for the garage. Wait, you said Red Harbor has a mole in the FOTB. Yes, someone high enough to issue fake badges and kill investigations. Then we don't need to break it, I said. The idea was forming, fast and sharp, born of years of diner gossip. We do a soft knock. We call the FOTB, but we don't call the main line. I looked at Ernesto. You have your world. I have mine. I know people, cops, agents they all eat, they all talk. There's one, an inspector, Lyra Quinn. She's real, honest. My old boss, Sal, used to comp her meals. She's got a reputation for hating dirty agents more than she hates guys like, well, guys like you. You want to call a federal agent here? I want to call her. On her private line, I have it in my phone. Sal gave it to me once, in case of a real emergency. I think this qualifies. I pulled out my real phone, the one Oates wanted. We tell her we have a tip, proof of an FOTB mole, serial numbers from fake badges, right here. Ernesto stared at me, then at the strongbox. He was calculating. It's a risk. If she's not clean... She's clean, I said with a certainty that surprised even me. It's my call, my turf. He nodded, once. Make the call, but be quick. Oates just finished his route. He knew I looked at him. How? Hex, he said, as if it were obvious. I dialed. My fingers were shaking, but I got it. It rang twice. Quinn, a woman's voice said, sharp, tired, no nonsense. Inspector Quinn, I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. My name is Keely Hart. I work at the Comet Diner, Sal's old place. I have something you need to see. It's about your fake agents. Silence. Then, where are you, Miss Hart? Quill's garage, off Mariner. But they're coming. Oates, he's coming now. Stay put. Don't touch anything. I'm 7 minutes out. Do not engage. The line went dead. 7 minutes, well, I said to Ernesto. He was looking at the door. We don't have 7 minutes. We have 30 seconds. The sound of a truck engine rumbled outside. Brakes hissed. Hide, Ernesto said, grabbing my arm, pulling me toward the locker bay. No, I said, yanking my arm free. I'm tired of hiding. I looked around, desperate. My eyes landed on my old canvas cutlery bag, the one I'd thrown in my car. I'd never taken it out. I unzipped it and pulled out the first thing I touched. A heavy, stainless steel pancake flipper, the wide, solid kind. I held it like a club. Ernesto looked at the flipper, then at my face. A small, almost invisible smile quirked his lip. "All right, don't swing until you see the whites of their aprons." The door burst open. It was Oates, and the refrigerator-sized giant from the diner, and two more guys, both wiry and mean-looking. They saw us. They froze. Oates's face went from surprise to pure, ugly rage. "You," he snarled at me. "You're with him." "She's with me," Ernesto said. He stepped forward, putting himself between me and them. "This is over, Oates. Your mole is burned. Your money is gone. Walk away." "Walk away," Oates laughed. "You cost me everything." He nodded to his men. "Take him. She watches." The two wiry guys went for Ernesto. The giant went for me. Hex dropped from the ceiling rafters. He landed in total silence between the two wiry guys. One of them turned, raising a crowbar. Hex moved like water. A block, a twist, a strike to the throat. The man went down, gagging. The second one swung. Hex ducked under it, drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus, and as he doubled over, chopped him on the back of the neck. He crumpled, two men down in less than 3 seconds. The giant was still coming at me. He was slow, but he was huge. Ernesto moved on Oates. It was exactly like the diner. Oates threw a wild, clumsy punch. Ernesto sidestepped, caught the arm, twisted. It was that same, soft, horrifying joint lock. Oates howled and dropped to his knees, his arm trapped at an impossible angle. That left the giant. He saw his friends down, his boss kneeling, and he turned, his big, flat face full of panic. He lunged, not at me, but at the strong box. His hand closed on the box. He turned to run. I didn't think. I just acted diner instincts. A customer tries to grab the tip jar. You block the exit. I swung the pancake flipper. I aimed for his head, but he moved. The solid steel thwacked loudly against his wrist. He roared, a sound of pure pain, and his hand flew open. The strongbox clattered to the oily floor. He stared at his hand, then at me, then at the flipper. He was about to charge when a sound pierced the air. A siren, close, getting closer. "Cops!" Oates screamed, his voice strained. "It's a setup." "Lyra," I breathed. "It's not Lyra," Ernesto said, his voice deadly serious. He was looking at the street. "That's not a Graybridge PD siren. It's fake." Crash! The sound of 1,000 wine glasses shattering. The plate glass window at the front of the garage exploded inwards. "Sniper!" Hex yelled. Ernesto let go of Oates and launched himself at me. He didn't push me down. He tackled me, wrapping his arms around me, twisting his body so he landed on the bottom, shielding me with his own. We hit the concrete floor hard, my head tucked under his chin, the pancake flipper skittering away. Glass rained down on us, tiny, glittering fragments dusting his hair, his coat. I was completely covered by him. His heart was hammering against my chest. Or maybe it was mine. I couldn't tell. "Go, go!" Oates was screaming. The giant grabbed him, and they scrambled out the back door, leaving their men behind. The fake siren faded. Ernesto didn't move for a long second. He just lay on top of me, his breath warm against my hair, the smell of mint and wool. "Are you hit?" he whispered, his voice rough. "No," I managed to say. "Are you—" He rolled off me, getting to his feet in one fluid motion. He was covered in tiny shards of glass. "We have to go. Quinn is real, but Red Harbor just proved they're willing to go public." He pulled me to my feet. Hex was already gone. We ran, and we didn't go to my car. We slipped out the back, through another alley and into a different street. The rain had started again. A cold, miserable drizzle. We ducked under a leaking tin awning, the sound of the rain drumming just above our heads. I started to shake. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a cold, sick emptiness. My teeth were chattering. Ernesto watched me, his face grim in the gray light. He said nothing. He just shrugged off his heavy wool coat, the one he'd worn at Deck 7, and wrapped it around my shoulders. over the leather jacket. It was heavy, and it smelled like him. I clutched it. They tried to kill us. They tried to kill me, he corrected, but his eyes were on me. You were just in the way. We stood there, a foot apart, under the noisy tin roof. He reached up, his movements slow, hesitant. You have glass, he said. He touched my hair. His fingers were so gentle. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't a command. It was a question. He brushed a glittering shard from my bangs. His fingertips grazed my temple, sending a jolt through me that had nothing to do with fear. I stared at him. I could feel the warmth of his palm, radiating heat near my cheek. His eyes were dark, no longer like ice, but like the deep, churning river water. I could see the lines of his chest rising and falling under his shirt, still damp from the rain. I should have stepped back. I should have told him to stop. I just couldn't. He held my gaze. His hand was still by my face, his thumb stroking my temple. Just once. Don't let me mess this up, he whispered. The words were almost lost in the rain. I swallowed, my throat dry. I could feel his warmth and the cold of the rain and the terror, all swirling into one impossible feeling. Then don't rush, I whispered back. His coat was still around my shoulders, heavy with his scent and the damp of the rain when we got back to the sterile, beige apartment in the glass tower. We hadn't run into Lyra Quinn. Hex had materialized at the end of the alley, a dark shape in the growing dawn, and pointed to a different car, not my hatchback, not Ernesto's sedan, but a boring, gray pickup truck. He drove us back, in total silence. She secured it, Ernesto said. As we walked into the apartment, the door clicked shut behind us. Quinn, how do you know? Because she's good, he said, and because she's already here. Lyra Quinn was sitting on the beige couch, looking completely out of place. She wasn't in uniform. She was in jeans and a worn field jacket, her hair pulled back in a severe, practical knot. The pancake flipper from the garage was on the coffee table. Next to it was the strong box, which was now open. She didn't stand up. Her eyes, a sharp, intelligent gray, raked over me, taking in Ernesto's coat, the glass in my hair, the grease on my jeans. Then she looked at Ernesto. There was no fear in her, just a deep, bone-weary calculation. Keely Hart, she said, her voice like gravel. Sal always said you were too smart for that diner. Looks like he was right. Inspector, I started. Save it, she said. She pushed a thin file folder across the table. I ran the plates on the van that shot up my scene. Stolen, the 2 men Hex incapacitated are low-level Red Harbor runners. They'll wake up with amnesia and a headache. The strongbox was a good call. Ernesto, who had been standing by the window, turned. What did you find? Not enough, she said, tapping the folder. The box had a few of these. She held up one of the fake FOTB badges in an evidence bag. And this. She slid a single piece of paper toward us. It was a bank transfer statement. A wire for $10,000 sent from an FOTB operational account. To Oates, I asked. No, to the Comet Diner, a public safety violation payout for a food safety inspection that never happened. Your boss, Sal, would have just seen it as a lucky break, a government mistake. But it's not a mistake. It's a payment. Ernesto picked up the paper. An internal account. Who authorized it? Lyra Quinn stood up. She looked at Ernesto with open distrust. I don't like you. Serrano, I know who you are. I know what Obsidian Court is. We're not friends. We're not, he agreed. But, she said, turning her gaze to me, I hate dirty agents more. The account is managed by one man, Supervisor Marlo Finch. He's my boss, and he's untouchable. Finch. The name sounded like dry leaves. $10,000, I said, looking at the paper. For a fake inspection of a diner that barely makes that in a month. I let out a short, bitter laugh. The legal system has an expensive palate. Ernesto's lips twitched, that ghost of a smile again. It was gone in an instant. I can't touch Finch, Lyra said. He's too high up. He'll see me coming. He'll bury this. And he'll bury me. The evidence from the box is circumstantial. It's not enough to move on him. So what do we do? I asked. Lyra looked at me, then at Ernesto. This conversation never happened. I was never here. I'm taking the box, the badges, and my 2 new unconscious prisoners. What you do is your business. She walked to the door. But Keely, if you're going to set a trap for a fox, you have to do it in the hen house. He's comfortable with your diner. He thinks it's his. She opened the door, then paused. And Sal always raved about your apple pie. Don't be a stranger. She was gone. The apartment was silent. A stage, I said, repeating his words from the warehouse. She's right, we have to do it at the Comet. Ernesto nodded. He was already in motion, pulling a laptop from a hidden bag. Hex is scrubbing the garage, removing any trace of us. We have until nightfall. Finch is arrogant, but he's not stupid. Oates will report the failure. Finch will want to clean up his loose ends, meaning you. And the drive, I said, the crypto wallet, they still think I know where it is. Which is why, he said. We're going to tell them. The next few hours were a blur. We didn't go back to the diner. Not yet. Hex arrived with bags of equipment. My little greasy spoon was about to become an intelligence hub. Finch will be listening, Ernesto said, holding up a tiny, metallic object. He'll be monitoring your phone, your apartment, so we give him a new channel, one we control. He laid out the plan. It was simple. It was terrifying. First, the tech, Hex, who I was learning was some kind of special ops ghost, dismantled the old non-functional jukebox in the corner booth. He slipped a high-fidelity microphone inside it, wired to a transmitter that fed to a router. And this, Ernesto said, holding up the router. Where do we hide this? I looked around the diner. My eyes landed on the counter. The napkin dispenser, the big stainless steel one. It's hollow underneath. No one ever cleans it. In 10 minutes, the Comet Diner had a covert encrypted live stream, feeding audio and video from 2 pinhole cameras directly to Ernesto's laptop. Next, my friends. My stomach was in knots. Zoe, I said, Zoe Park, my coworker. She's supposed to work with me tonight. She can't be there, Ernesto said. I know. I pulled out my real phone. The one Red Harbor was probably listening to. I dialed her number. Keely, she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. You okay? Sal said the weirdest thing about a kitchen fire. Zoe, I said, letting my voice crack. I didn't have to fake the exhaustion. I'm sick. I've been throwing up all day. I think it was that bad fish from the market. I can't cover the shift. I'm so sorry. Can you take the whole thing? Oh my God, Keely. Of course, she said, all concern. Don't even worry about it. You rest. You want me to bring you some soup? No, I said too quickly. No, I need to sleep for like a week. Thanks, Zoe. You're a lifesaver. Feel better, sweetie. I hung up, feeling like the lowest form of life. She's safe. Good, Ernesto said. Now for Lara. I took the burner phone he'd given me, the clean one. I dialed her private number. Quinn. Inspector, I said, it's Keely. This is not a secure line. Miss Hart. I know. I just wanted to say I'll be working tonight, all night. Sal's paying me double to cover the fire damage, and I'm baking. I'm bringing in my special apple pie, the one Sal always liked. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. I'm not usually in that part of town at night, she said. I know, I said, but I'll save you a slice, just in case you're craving it. I hung up. She'll be there, I said. Ernesto nodded. He held out his hand. In his palm was a pen, a simple, black, ballpoint pen with a silver clip. It's not a pen, I guessed. It is, he said. It also records broadcast quality audio for 12 hours. Keep it on you, on your apron, pointing up. The cameras get the video. This gets the sound. I took it. It felt heavy. I clipped it into the pocket of my clean apron. The one I'd brought from the apartment, it just looked like a pen. Last part, he said, the bait. The drive, I said. He nodded. Oates will come. Finch will come. They'll come to silence you and to get the drive. We have to make them believe it's there. He went to Sal's office. He found the old metal recipe box where Sal kept his specials. He pulled out the card for the Comet Deluxe, our biggest, messiest breakfast platter. He slipped a slim black USB drive a dummy into the box, behind the recipe card. Now, he said, we tell them. He used a laptop I'd never seen before, routing his signal through 6 different countries. He sent one anonymous text message to a number in Oates' file. Comet Deluxe, tonight, she's alone. They'll bite, he said. And you, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Where will you be? Right here, he said. He pointed to the last booth, the one in the back, by the kitchen, with a clear view of the counter and the door. I'm just another customer. Tonight, Keely, this is your diner. You run the show. I stared at him, and he was putting his life, this whole operation, in my hands, in the hands of a waitress with a pancake flipper. He put his hand on my shoulder. His thumb brushed the collar of the leather jacket. You're not a waitress tonight. You're the house, and the house always wins. Night fell. The buzzing sea on the Comet sign, which Hex had repaired, flickered on, casting its familiar, broken red light onto the wet street. I unlocked the door. I turned on the coffee machine. I put the pies in the display. Everything was normal, except for the microphone in the jukebox, the pen on my apron, and the Mafia Boss sitting in my back booth, reading a newspaper. He looked the part. He'd changed into a dark gray Henley, the sleeves pushed up his forearms. He looked like a tired construction foreman or a dock worker nursing a cup of coffee. He hadn't said a word in an hour. The bell chimed at 7:03 p.m. My heart leaped into my throat, but it was just a regular old man Hemlock. Evening, Keely, just the coffee, he mumbled. I served him. My hands were shaking. The bell chimed again at 7:30. This time, it was them, Oates, the giant, and a third man, wearing a cheap suit and a nervous expression I didn't recognize. My blood turned to ice, but I kept the smile plastered on my face. Oates, fancy seeing you. Table for 3. Oates' eyes were small and hard. He didn't smile. We're not here to eat. We're here on official FOTB business. Again. Really, I said, wiping the counter. Because the last time, your badges were fake and your friend pulled a knife. The giant tensed. This time, a new voice said, it's official. A man in a real expensive-looking suit stepped in. He was older, with silver hair and a politician's smile. He flashed a badge, a real one. Supervisor Marlowe Finch, FOTB, he said. We're investigating a series of threats made against a federal witness. You, Miss Hart. I almost laughed. Me a witness. We believe, Finch said, his smile never wavering, that you've been coerced by organized crime figures. We're here to take you into protective custody. And, Oates sneered, to collect the evidence you've been holding. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, backing up a step. The drive, sweetheart, Oates said, moving toward the counter. The one you helped Serrano steal. We know you have it. I'm going to need you to stay on that side of the counter, I said, my voice sharp, unless you have a real warrant to search this property. Finch's smile faltered. He looked at Oates. He was standing right in front of the pinhole camera. I saw his hand. He made a small, subtle gesture, a quick, 2-fingered tap on his thigh. A signal. We don't need a warrant, Oates said, and he put his hand on the counter to vault over it. The bell chimed. Excuse me, a sharp, tired voice said. Is the apple pie fresh? Lyra Quinn. She was in her civilian clothes, her hands in her jacket pockets. She looked like any other customer. Finch froze. He knew her. His face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. Inspector Quinn, he said, forcing a smile. What a surprise. We're in the middle of an operation here. Really? Lyra said, walking slowly to the counter. She looked at Oates, who was still half tense to jump. She looked at me. Looks to me like you're harassing a civilian. Supervisor, I'll just have a coffee. Black. I poured it, my hand rock steady. I slid it to her. "Now," Finch said, his voice like ice. "Miss Hart, you will come with us. Oates, secure the package." "He's not touching anything," I said, planting my hands on the counter. "I told you. Get a warrant." "You," Oates snarled. "That's enough." Finch snapped. He was flustered. Lyra's presence had broken his script. He took a step toward the counter, toward Sal's office. "This is a matter of national security." As he moved, he brushed against the pie display, a small, padded envelope, the same kind Oates had planted behind the coffee machine, fell from the inside of his suit jacket. It landed on the floor with a soft thud. Finch didn't notice, but Lyra did. I watched, frozen. As Lyra Quinn bent down, as if to tie her shoe, she picked up the envelope as she stood up, holding it. "Supervisor," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "you dropped this." Finch looked at the envelope. His face went completely white. He knew what it was. It was dirty money, a payoff. "That's not mine," he stammered. "Isn't it?" Lyra said. "It looks just like the bribe money we've been tracing in the Red Harbor case." Oates knew the game was up. He lunged, not for me, not for Lyra, but for the recipe box in Sal's office. "Get the drive." My phone, the burner, buzzed in my pocket. A text. From Ernesto. 3 words. "Cut the lights." I didn't hesitate. My hand shot under the counter to the main breaker switch. Sal always had me flip it at closing. I yanked it down. The diner plunged into total, absolute blackness. The jukebox music died. The coffee machine hissed into silence. The buzzing sea outside went dead. A woman screamed Lyra, faking it. "He's got the drive," Oates yelled in the dark. A second later, the green, ghostly emergency lights clicked on, bathing the diner in an apocalyptic glow. It was a tableau from hell. Oates was frozen, halfway to the office. The giant was shielding Finch. And Lyra Quinn had her service weapon drawn and pointed directly at Marlowe Finch's head. "FOTB, don't move," she yelled. The lights snapped back on, full, fluorescent, unforgiving. Finch stood there, blinking, his hands half raised. Oates and his men looked at the front door, ready to bolt. "Marlowe Finch," Lyra said, her voice ringing with authority as she snapped handcuffs on him. "You're under arrest for bribery of a federal agent, evidence tampering, and consorting with the Red Harbor Syndicate." Oates and his men didn't wait. They bolted. They shoved past the counter and ran for the front door, throwing it open, and ran directly into 2 of Ernesto's men, the same 2 from the diner. In their black polo shirts, they weren't there to fight. They were just there. A human wall. Oates and his crew recoiled, turning to run out the back, through the kitchen. They ran straight into Hex, who was standing there like a ghost. "This way," Hex said, and he opened the back door, pointing them into the alley. "They're getting away," I yelled. "Let them," Ernesto said. He was suddenly at my side, his hand on my back. I heard the sound of sirens, real ones, this time. Not the fake Red Harbor siren, but the entire Graybridge PD. Oates and his men ran down the alley, desperate to escape, and ran directly into a phalanx of uniformed police officers, led by Lyra Quinn's backup team. It was a pincer, a legal and street-level trap. Ernesto hadn't stopped them. He'd just herded them, right into Lyra's waiting net. Finch was standing, cuffed, by the counter, his face a mask of disbelief. Lyra was reading him his rights. The diner was full of cops. Ernesto's hand was still on my back, a solid, warm pressure. He leaned in, his voice for me alone. "Good work, Keeley," he whispered. "You cleared the diner." The drive back to Arden Key was a silent, vibrating blur. The flashing blue and red lights of the Graybridge PD faded in my rearview mirror, swallowing the Comet Diner whole. My diner. It felt like a stage set I had just walked away from. The play over. The actors gone. My hands were still shaking, gripping the steering wheel of the gray pickup truck. Ernesto sat beside me, as still as stone. He hadn't said another word since his quiet "good work." We pulled into the warehouse. The massive metal door groaned shut, sealing us in, and the sudden, profound silence was a shock. It was just us. The adrenaline began to drain out of me, leaving a hollow, aching exhaustion in its place. The warehouse was exactly as we'd left it, warm, pools of yellow light, the scent of coffee and old paper. But there was a new smell, faint but unmistakable. The sweet, baked apple and cinnamon scent of my pie. It must have clung to my clothes, a ghostly reminder of the trap. I walked to the massive, industrial-paned window, staring out at the dark, churning river. The rain had started again. A soft, steady drumming on the roof. I felt empty. The terror of the last 2 days, the chase, the confrontation, it was over. Finch was arrested, Oates was in custody, Red Harbor's Graybridge operation was broken. I was safe. So why did I feel like I was about to shatter? I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. My shoulder throbbed. I looked down. The leather jacket he'd given me was fine, but the collar of my shirt underneath was torn, and a long, angry red scratch wept a thin line of blood along my collarbone. I must have done it when he tackled me in the garage, or when I'd scrambled behind the counter. I winced, touching it gingerly. "You're hurt." His voice was quiet, right behind me. I hadn't even heard him move. I turned. He was holding a small, black box, a first aid kit. His face was unreadable in the dim light, but his eyes were fixed on the scratch. "It's just a scrape," I said, my voice sounding weak. He stepped closer, into the pool of light from the lamp. He didn't reach for me. He just opened the kit. He pulled out a small, foil-wrapped wipe and a sterile bandage. "That jacket saved you from worse," he said. He looked at the scrape, then at my eyes. His gaze was steady. "May I?" His voice was low. He was asking permission to touch me. The man who had cleared my diner, who had taken down Oates with a single, fluid movement, who commanded ghosts like Hex. He was asking permission to put a bandage on a scratch. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded. He stepped closer. I had to tilt my head back slightly to keep looking at him. I held my breath. His movements were impossibly gentle. His left hand came up, his fingers brushing the hair back from my shoulder. His touch was warm, his fingertips slightly rough. They barely grazed my skin, just enough to hold the fabric of my shirt away. With his other hand, he tore open the wipe. The sharp, clean smell of antiseptic cut through the scent of apples. "This might sting," he whispered. He pressed the wipe to the scratch. It did sting. A small, sharp bite. I hissed, a tiny intake of breath. "I know," he said, his voice a low rumble. He dabbed at the skin, his touch so light, so precise. He wasn't a brute. He was a surgeon. I watched his face. He was completely focused, his brow furrowed just slightly. His dark lashes were stark against his skin. My heart was doing a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I wasn't breathing. Or maybe I was. I realized my breath was rising and falling in the exact same rhythm as his. I was matching his unconsciously. His eyes lifted from my shoulder and met mine. The world just stopped. The rain, the river, the exhaustion. It all fell away. There was just the intense, electric silence between us, the clean smell of the antiseptic, and the solid, warm presence of him. His eyes, those river ice eyes, weren't cold now. They were dark, deep, and searching. He was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time, and like he had known me for 100 years. He finished cleaning the scrape, and he didn't move away. His hand was still resting gently on my good shoulder, his thumb stroking the fabric of my shirt. A small, absent-minded circle. He picked up the bandage, peeling the white tabs off. He placed it over the scratch, his fingers brushing my skin again, leaving a trail of warmth. He was done. His hand started to pull away. I acted. I didn't think. I just did. I lifted my own hand and placed it on top of his, on the back of his hand. His skin was warm. My fingers curled over his. It wasn't a thank you. It was an answer, a yes. He went completely still. I watched his throat as he swallowed. His eyes searched mine. looking for what doubt fear. He didn't find any. His other hand, the one that had been holding my shirt, came up. He didn't touch my face. He grazed his knuckles. Just once, along my jawline, a question. I leaned into the touch. That was all the answer he needed. He leaned in. It was slow, so agonizingly slow. He gave me every second, every fractional inch to pull away, to turn my head, to say no. I met him halfway. His lips touched mine. It wasn't a crash, it was a landing. It was soft, hesitant, and breathtakingly gentle. It was just a press, a taste, mint and coffee, and something that was just him. It was a question, and I answered by pressing back, just slightly. It was enough. The kiss deepened. It was still slow, still respectful, but the tentative question was gone, replaced by a firm, confident statement. It was a kiss of relief, a kiss of we made it. It was the end of the adrenaline and the beginning of something else. He pulled back, but only an inch. Our foreheads touched. We were breathing the same air. I kept my eyes closed. "Keely," he whispered. It wasn't a name. It was a prayer. A low, instrumental sound filled the silence, a soft, bluesy jazz. It had been playing the whole time, so quietly I hadn't even noticed it. He moved, shifting his weight. He slid the armchair he'd been sitting in earlier, and with his hand still linked with mine, he drew me to my feet. I was standing in front of him, our bodies almost touching. His hands, those capable, dangerous, gentle hands, slid from my arms to my back. They rested there, a solid, safe weight. Then slowly, as if testing the ice, they slid down to the curve of my waist. He stopped, his thumbs resting on my hip bones, waiting. I gave him my answer. I lifted my arms, my hands shaking just a little, and looped them around his neck. A small sigh escaped him. It was a sound of surrender. I could feel the solid, tense muscles of his shoulders under my hands, the hard planes of his back through the thin fabric of his shirt. He was so strong. I pulled myself a fraction of an inch closer. A tiny, breathless laugh escaped me. It was a sound of pure disbelief. My hair brushed his cheek, and he turned his face into it, his eyes closing. We started to move, not a dance, just a sway, a slow two-step shuffle to the rhythm of the quiet jazz, there in the pool of yellow light by the rainy window. His lips found mine again. This time, there was no hesitation. It was deeper, warmer. It was a real kiss. Our mouths moved together, learning each other. His hand slid from my waist up my back, pulling me closer, until my chest was pressed against his. I could feel his heart, a strong, steady thump, thump, thump that matched my own. His lips parted from mine, trailing a line of warmth along my jaw. "Slow down," I whispered, though I wasn't sure which one of us I was talking to. "Slow?" he murmured back, his voice thick, his lips against my ear. He guided us backward just 2 steps, until the back of my legs hit the deep, leather sofa. He didn't push. He just leaned. We sank down into the cushions together, a tangle of arms and legs. I landed half-sprawled across his lap, his arms locked around me, holding me as if I were the only solid thing in the world. And we were kissing, really kissing. It was deep and passionate, and it felt like I had been starving and had just been handed a feast. His hand was in my hair, his fingers gently cradling the back of my head, holding me to him. My own hands were gripping his shoulders, clinging to him. It was safe. That was the most shocking part. I was wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man I'd ever met, and I had never, ever felt safer. His hands roamed, but they were respectful. They stroked my back, my arms, my shoulders. They stayed above the line, away from any boundary. He was giving me all the control. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against mine again. He was breathing hard. "Keely," he said, his voice rough, "if this is too fast, if it's too much, you tell me to stop." I opened my eyes. He was watching me, his gaze intense, vulnerable. "I will," I whispered. I didn't want him to stop. I leaned in and kissed him again, and this time, it was me setting the pace. It was a long, slow, deep kiss that said everything I couldn't. It said I'm here. It said I'm not afraid. It said I choose this. He sighed into the kiss, his entire body relaxing against mine. He held me tighter, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing him in, mint and wool and warm skin. We just stayed there, entwined on the sofa, listening to the quiet jazz and the steady, rhythmic drumming of the rain on the massive tin roof. It was a punctuation mark, the end of the story about a waitress and a mafia boss, and the beginning of a story about Keely and Ernesto. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, the light in the warehouse was different. It was gray. Morning. I was on the sofa, covered by a heavy, soft blanket. He was gone. I sat up. I was still in my clothes, still in his leather jacket. I felt rumpled and rested. I stood up and walked to the kitchen area, and I saw him. He was standing at the industrial window, looking out at the river just as I had been. He was wearing a fresh shirt. A mug of coffee was steaming in his hand. He heard me, and he turned. A set of clean, folded clothes was on the counter, a simple gray t-shirt and sweatpants. Next to it was a fresh cup, waiting. He didn't smile, he just watched me. I walked over. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I looked at the clean clothes, and then at him. This was it, the morning after, the moment where things got awkward or real. I picked up my coffee, I took a sip. It was perfect. He hadn't saved me. He hadn't rescued me. He had shown me a truth, and I had walked into it with my eyes open. I had made my choice. He had made his... I looked at him over the rim of my cup. He hadn't taken his eyes off me. "So," I said, my voice a little hoarse, "what happens now?" "Now," he said, his voice low and steady, "we have breakfast." It wasn't a thank you for my help. It wasn't an I owe you. It was a promise. It was the beginning. Breakfast at the warehouse became our new normal. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was an understanding. After that first morning, I didn't go back to the glass tower apartment. I stayed at the warehouse, not in his bed. I slept on the massive leather sofa that was softer than any bed I'd ever owned, and he would take the chair opposite, watching the fire die out. We'd talk. We'd plan. And in the morning, he'd make coffee. The arrest of Finch and Oates had cut the head off the snake in Graybridge, but it hadn't killed the body. Red Harbor was still breathing. And its true head, the man Finch and Oates were terrified of, was Kane Rourke. Rourke was a different animal. He wasn't a street-level thug like Oates or a corrupt suit like Finch. He was old money. He was legitimate. His name was on hospitals, on museums, and he was, as Ernesto quietly explained, the man who personally signed off on the trafficking ledgers. Finch and Oates were just the cleanup crew. Rourke was the source. And Rourke was attending the annual Founders Gala at the Aurelius Hotel, which is how I found myself standing in front of a floor-length mirror, looking at a stranger. The Aurelius Hotel wasn't just in a different part of the city. It was in a different universe. The Comet Diner was grease and linoleum. The Aurelius was marble, old-world gold leaf, and the hushed, terrifying sound of generational wealth. The air smelled like expensive perfume and old money, a combination that made my stomach turn. "You look good," Ernesto said. I turned. He was standing in the doorway of the hotel suite he'd secured for us to prepare. He wasn't the man from the diner or the warehouse. He was Mr. S., the mysterious new investor who had bought a table at the gala. He wore a tuxedo, custom-tailored, and it fit him like armor. He looked like he belonged. I looked back at the mirror. The woman there didn't. She was wearing a dress the color of a midnight blue sky, made of a heavy satin that felt like liquid against my skin. It was beautiful, and it felt like a lie. "I look like a waitress in a costume," I said, my voice tight. "You're a culinary consultant," he corrected, his voice calm. "My team built your portfolio. You've advised Michelin star restaurants in 3 different cities. Tonight, you're introducing the dessert course." It was an insane, paper-thin cover, but it was just crazy enough to work. "And this," he said, stepping forward, he held up a delicate, dark metal hairpin, shaped like a feather, "is the real key." I turned, and he slid the pin into the simple knot my hair had been pulled into. I felt his fingers, warm and precise, against my scalp. A tiny, cold object was nestled in the metalwork, the microphone. "They'll be listening for a wire at the door," he said, his voice low, close to my ear. "They won't be looking for a hair accessory." He stepped back. His hands rested on my shoulders for just a second. A silent, steady pressure. Then he held out his arm. "It's just another diner, Keeley. The plates are just cleaner." The ballroom was suffocating, a sea of black tuxedos and dresses that glittered with diamonds. A string quartet played in the corner. I felt like a fraud, like at any second someone would tap me on the shoulder and ask me to refill their water glass. Ernesto's hand was a firm, warm presence on the small of my back. He navigated us through the crowd, nodding at people he didn't know, smiling a polite, empty smile. He was a chameleon. "Target acquired," he murmured, his voice for me alone. 9 o'clock, by the champagne fountain. I looked. It was him, Kane Rourke. He wasn't what I expected. He wasn't a brute. He was handsome, in a sharp, cold way. Silver hair at the temples, a devastatingly expensive suit, and a smile that looked practiced for cameras. He was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, schmoozing with a city councilman. He looked like a senator. And standing next to him, looking nervous and sweaty, was Commissioner Davies, Finch's partner, the real mole. "Rourke is the bank," Ernesto whispered. "Davies is the key. Rourke gives him the money. Davies makes the Red Harbor problems disappear. We need to catch the transaction. We need to link them, on tape, with the trafficking ledger." "And the ledger," I whispered back, "is the dessert you'll be offering him," Ernesto said. The string quartet swelled, shifting from a quiet classical piece to a slow, sweeping waltz. Ernesto didn't ask. He just turned, took my hand, and led me onto the polished dance floor. "What are we doing?" I hissed. "We're supposed to be working." "We are," he said. He pulled me close. His hand was firm on my back, my hand on his shoulder. We started to move. It wasn't like the sway in the warehouse. This was public. This was a performance. Every person in this room was watching everyone else. "We need to be seen," he said, his voice a low rumble against my cheek. "We need him to see you with me. He knows Oates and Finch failed. He knows the Waitress was involved. He's been assessing the threat. Now, he sees you, not as a threat, as an asset, my asset." He spun me, a slow, graceful turn. I looked past his shoulder. Rourke was watching us. His champagne glass was still. His smile was gone. His eyes weren't angry. They were cold, calculating. He was looking at me. The waitress from the diner, now draped in satin and dancing with a man who had just bought a $50,000 gala table under a fake name. He was connecting the dots. "He's watching," I whispered. "Good," Ernesto said. His grip on my hand tightened. "Let him." We moved with the music. For a minute, just a minute. It wasn't a performance. It was just us. His hand on my back, the solid wall of his chest, the faint, clean scent of his cologne. It was the same feeling I'd had in the warehouse. Safety. An island of calm in a sea of sharks. I had a tiny, almost invisible earpiece in my left ear. It crackled to life. "Comet Blue is live," Lyra Quinn's voice whispered, tinny and distant. I almost jumped. "I'm on the house security feed. Rourke is getting nervous. Davies is moving." The music ended. The dance floor cleared. "Showtime," Ernesto murmured. He released me, and the loss of his touch was like a sudden, cold draft. My heart was hammering. I was just a waitress. I was just a waitress. I repeated it to myself. I wasn't a spy. I remembered my job. I read people. I walked toward Rourke. He saw me coming. His eyes narrowed. This was not in his plan. "Mr. Rourke," I said. My voice was pure Comet Diner, polite, professional, and slightly deferential. He looked down at me, his smile returning, but it was thin. And you are? Keely Hart, sir. I'm the culinary consultant for tonight's event. I hope you're enjoying the appetizers. They're adequate, he said, dismissing me. I'm glad, I said, not moving. I understand you're a collector, sir, of rare things. His eyes sharpened. I dabble. We have something in the private wine gallery, a very rare vintage we're previewing. It's not on the public list. The details on it are sensitive. I was told to bring any true connoisseurs for a private tasting. Rourke looked at me, and he was reading me. He saw the waitress, trying to impress a rich guest, and he saw the woman who had been dancing with Ernesto Serrano. He was intrigued. He thought I was a messenger. Commissioner Davies is already there, I added. That sealed it. Lead the way, Miss Hart, and he said. I led him from the thrumming ballroom into a quiet, wood-paneled hallway, and then into the wine gallery. It was a long, narrow room, lined with bottles behind glass. Commissioner Davies was at the far end, wringing his hands. Rourke, Davies said, his voice strained, this is irregular. Relax, Commissioner, Rourke said, his eyes on me. Where is this tasting? The door opened behind us. Ernesto. Mr. S. Rourke tensed. Davies looked like he was going to faint. The trap was sprung. Rourke, Commissioner, Ernesto said, his voice pleasant. He was holding a small, polished wooden box. Thank you for coming. I believe you were expecting a dividend. Payment for your services regarding the Red Harbor logistics. You're Serrano, Rourke said. It wasn't a question. I am, Ernesto said. He slid the box onto the long tasting table. A gesture of goodwill. The drive. The full ledger. In exchange for your retirement. Rourke laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think you can just buy me out with my own money? I'm not buying, Ernesto said. I'm trading the drive for your cooperation in dismantling your own network, starting with Commissioner Davies. Davies sputtered. This is entrapment. It's a business meeting, Ernesto said. He raised his champagne glass, which he carried from the ballroom, a toast to new acquisitions. Rourke stared at him, then at the box. He wanted that drive. It was his entire operation. He picked up his own glass from the table, a silent acceptance of the parley. As he did, his fingers brushed the side of the wooden box. Got him, the nano ink, the invisible marker Lyra needed. Rourke set his glass down. He didn't trust this. He flipped the latch on the box. Inside, there was no hard drive, just a single black burner phone. Rourke looked at Ernesto, confused. He picked it up. The screen flashed to life. It was the Polaroid, the picture of me from the diner, the one they'd left in my apartment. Underneath it, in white, block letters, was a single sentence. Greetings from the Comet Diner. Your account is closed. Rourke's face went white, a mask of pure reptilian fury. You, he hissed, his eyes locking on me. The waitress. Data received. Keely. Lyra's voice buzzed in my ear. We have the ledger. The drive just auto-forwarded. We have it all. We have the commissioner. Rourke lunged. He wasn't lunging for me, or the phone. He was lunging for the table, to flip it, to create chaos. Hex. Now, Ernesto said, his voice low. The lights in the gallery, the hallway, the entire ballroom. Click. Total blackness. The only light was the green, ghostly glow of the exit signs. Screams erupted from the ballroom. Chaos. Move! Ernesto grabbed my hand, his grip like steel. We burst out of the gallery into pure pandemonium. The glitterati were now just a terrified mob, pushing and shoving in the dark. There, a voice yelled. 3 of Rourke's men. They weren't in tuxedos. They were in black suits, and they were pushing through the crowd, heading straight for me. They were Rourke's personal security. One of them got to me first. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in, tearing the delicate satin. Ernesto didn't hesitate. He spun, not against the man, but with him, using the man's own momentum. He drove his elbow, hard, into the man's sternum. I heard the sickening, dull whoosh of air leaving his lungs. The man crumpled. A second guard lunged, a dark shape in the green light. He had something small and black in his hand, a taser. Ernesto moved inside the man's guard. He caught the wrist, twisted. I heard a small, sharp snap of bone. The taser clattered to the marble floor. The man howled, clutching his arm, and fell back. It wasn't lethal, it was just final. A loud alarm blared, deafening and high-pitched. "Security, hands up, hands up!" The main lights flickered, then snapped back on, blindingly bright. We were frozen in a sea of screaming, terrified partygoers. But the voice wasn't Rourke's. Lyra Quinn was standing on a chair, her service weapon pointed at the ceiling. She was flanked by 2 real hotel security guards. "Commissioner Davies," she yelled, her voice cutting through the panic, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to aid a racketeering organization and receiving bribes." The crowd parted. Davies was trying to crawl away. His tuxedo jacket ripped. Lyra hauled him to his feet and snapped handcuffs on his wrists. I looked around, my heart pounding. Rourke. He was gone. In the chaos, in the darkness, he had vanished. The 2 guards were a diversion. "He's gone," I said, breathless. Ernesto was already pulling me toward a service exit. Behind a curtain, I know. He was never the target. Davies was... We got the commissioner. We got the ledger. Rourke just lost his political cover. And his bank account. He's an eel. We knew he'd slip away. He shoved the heavy fire door open, and we spilled into a concrete stairwell. The alarm was muffled now, a dull, angry throb. We were alone, just us, the concrete, and the sound of our own breathing. "He's still out there," I panted. "Yes," Ernesto said. His face was grim, his eyes dark. "But tonight we took his armor, and his wallet. Now he's just a man, and a man with nothing left to lose is predictable." The fallout from the Founders Gala was a thunderclap, and the lightning was heading straight for me. Kane Rourke was gone, vanished like a ghost, but he had left a tremor in the underworld. His bank accounts were frozen. His political connections were either arrested or running for cover. Lyra Quinn had the ledger. He was a king with no kingdom, and he was angry. The rumors started a day later. They filtered up through the network Ernesto kept his ear to talk on the docks. Whispers from Red Harbor rats looking to flip. Rourke wasn't trying to rebuild. He wasn't trying to flee the country. He was coming to burn the Comet Diner to the ground. It was personal. It was the place where the thread was first pulled. It was my home, and he was going to erase it. "No," I said, my voice flat. "We were in the warehouse. The big map of Graybridge was still on the table. Absolutely not." "It's the only way." "Keely," Ernesto said. He was standing by the window, his silhouette stark against the gray morning. "He's predictable now. He's an animal. Cornered. He'll come to the place he associates with his loss. He wants to hurt me by hurting you. We end it there." "End it." I slammed my hand on the table. "He's bringing fire. Ernesto, it's a diner. It's Sal's livelihood. It's just wood and grease and linoleum. It'll go up in seconds. We can't just let him." "We won't let him," he said, turning. His eyes were calm, but there was a fire in them I hadn't seen before. "We will invite him. It's the one place on earth we control, the one place you know better than he does, better than I do." I stared at him, and the fear, the hot, churning panic, suddenly cooled. It crystallized into something hard and cold and sharp. He was right. It wasn't just Sal's diner. It was my diner. It was my home turf. I knew every loose floorboard, every flickering light, every dead spot in the security camera's view. "Okay," I said, my voice low. "If he wants to come to my house, I'll set the table." I grabbed the map and threw it to the floor. I pulled a fresh sheet of poster board from a stack and uncapped a black marker. "This is the real map," I said. For an hour, I drew. I didn't draw streets. I drew my world. The counter. It's reinforced steel from the 50s. You can hide behind it. The walk-in freezer door, the hinge sticks. But it's the only solid cover in the kitchen. The floor drain by the dishwasher, it always clogs. He'll trip. I marked the blind spots. The camera in the clock is good, but it can't see the corner of booth 4, right by the jukebox. That's where he'll sit. If he thinks he's smart, he'll put his back to the wall." "He will," Ernesto said, watching, his expression intense. "Good," I said, drawing a circle around it, "because the outlet there is faulty, and the main breaker is under the counter, right here." The plan was set. That night, there was no moon. Graybridge was wrapped in a thick, wet fog that muffled all sound. The Comet Diner was dark. We'd done it intentionally. The buzzing C on the sign was dead. It looked abandoned. A perfect, sad victim. Inside, it was a fortress. Hex, Ernesto, and I had spent the afternoon rearranging the furniture. It wasn't a diner anymore. It was a maze. The booths were pushed together, creating narrow, deliberate channels. The heavy-duty prep tables from the kitchen were laid on their sides, forming barriers. Ernesto's team was invisible. Lyra Quinn and a dozen real cops were in a containment perimeter, 3 blocks in every direction, hidden in unmarked cars. She wouldn't come in. It was a private business, and she couldn't risk a gunfight in a residential commercial block. She was the net. We were the bait. Ernesto stood by the front door, which was unlocked. He was checking a small, almost invisible microphone clipped to the doorframe. It was wired to a speaker hidden in the street cleaning truck Hex had borrowed and parked across the street. "Is it necessary?" I asked. "He needs to know the stakes," Ernesto said. He tested it, his voice low, but I knew it was carrying. "This diner is her property. Anyone who enters with fire leaves with cuffs. A public declaration, a line in the sand." I went to my station, behind the counter. It was the only place that felt normal. I slipped a cassette into the old tape deck Sal kept. I pressed play. A low, bluesy jazz tune, the same one from the warehouse, whispered into the room. "What's that for?" Ernesto asked, taking his position in the deepest shadow of the kitchen doorway, invisible but present. "Atmosphere." I said I was lying. The music was a trigger. It was a signal to a small, hidden device Hex had wired to the jukebox mic. The moment the music started, a secure, public live stream began, feeding directly to the homepage of the Graybridge Ledger, the city's biggest online newspaper. If Rourke was going to burn my home, the whole city was going to watch him do it. We waited. The silence was a living thing, broken only by the soft jazz and the drip of a leaky faucet. At 10:17 p.m., the bell above the door chimed. Kane Rourke walked in. He was no longer the polished senator from the gala. He was in a black turtleneck and a dark jacket, his face pale and tight with rage. He was holding a metal canister, an accelerant. Behind him were 2 men. One was a broad-shouldered man I didn't know, carrying a long-barreled torch, the arsonist. The other was the giant from the diner, the one whose wrist I'd hit. He was carrying a long, heavy-looking case. Rourke stopped, his eyes sweeping the dark, rearranged room. He saw me, sitting behind the counter, my hands resting on the laminate. "Just you," he sneered. "And the music, how quaint." "Can I get you some coffee, Kane?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. I was terrified, but that didn't matter. He was in my house. It's fresh. "Her single phone call," Rourke said, his voice a low, venomous hiss, more to himself than to me. A $2 phone call from a nobody, and it collapsed months of planning, my entire operation. "It's not the phone call you should be afraid of. Mr. Rourke," I said, leaning forward. "It's my cup of coffee." He looked confused. Then his face hardened. "Burn it!" he snapped at the arsonist. "Start with the counter." The arsonist stepped forward. He clicked the igniter on the torch. A long, blue-white flame roared to life, hissing in the quiet room. He took 1 step toward me. Whoosh! A dense, choking cloud of white CO2 erupted from under booth 4. The one with the faulty outlet, it wasn't the outlet, it was a pressurized canister, triggered by Hex. The cloud hit the arsonist square in the face and chest. The flame on the torch was extinguished instantly, starved of oxygen. The man staggered back, coughing, his torch useless, the room filled with a thick, white, artificial fog, and the fire alarm, a high-pitched, screaming whoop, 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 kicked on. The giant, seeing his man go down, ripped open his case. It wasn't a sniper rifle. It was a shotgun. "Rourke," he yelled, "the back!" The diner was chaos. The jazz music was drowned out by the alarm. The white smoke swirled, turning the room into a silent, black and white movie. I could see shapes, figures moving. Rourke was vaulting the counter, coming for me. A shot exploded. It was deafening in the small space. It wasn't the shotgun. It was a pistol. One of Rourke's men, a third one, had been hidden by the door. He had fired at me. Keely Ernesto's voice? He wasn't in the kitchen doorway. He was in the air. He launched himself, just as he had in the garage, tackling me, not down but sideways, sliding us both along the laminate counter, away from the line of fire. He grunted, a low, sharp sound of pain I had never heard him make. He pushed us behind the industrial steel fridge. "Are you hit?" he gasped, his face tight. "No," I said, my heart in my throat. "You are." A dark, wet stain was spreading across his shoulder, soaking the gray of his Henley. It just grazed me," he ground out, but his face was pale. He was still standing. He was still between me and the room. The shooter was moving, trying to get a clear angle on us. I could see his shadow through the swirling smoke. Rourke was shouting. I saw it, the high-pressure dish hose, the one with the metal nozzle, the one I used to blast dried egg yolks off plates. I grabbed it. I twisted the industrial hot water tap, and then the cold. I braced myself and pulled the trigger on the nozzle. A high-pressure jet of scalding hot water shot out, a solid 20-foot stream. I aimed it. The shooter, was raising his pistol. I hit his hand. He screamed. It was a raw, high-pitched sound of pure agony. The pistol clattered to the floor. Ernesto moved. Even wounded, he was a blur. He exploded from behind the fridge, kicked the pistol away, and slammed his good shoulder into the man's chest. He drove him back against the wall, and with a single, brutal chop to the man's neck, the shooter slid to the linoleum floor, out cold. The front door of the diner burst open. It wasn't more thugs. It was Lyra Quinn, flanked by 4 uniformed cops, their weapons drawn, their faces grim. The fire alarm, the smoke, the sound of the shot, it was all the probable cause she needed. Police don't move hands in the air. The scene was frozen. The smoke was clearing. The jazz was still playing, a ghostly, terrible soundtrack. Rourke was standing by the jukebox, his hands half raised, his face a mask of utter defeat. The giant was on his knees, his hands on his head. The arsonist was still coughing. The red and blue lights from the street outside flooded the room. Mixing with the flashing red of the fire alarm, it was a stage, and the whole city was watching. I looked at Ernesto, and he was leaning against the counter, his bad shoulder pressed to the steel. He looked at me, and a small, pained smile touched his lips. Then his legs buckled. He didn't fall. He caught himself, dropping to one knee. I ran to him. I dropped to the floor, sliding, and caught him. I wrapped my arms around his waist, holding him up. His head fell forward, resting on my shoulder. He was heavy and real and bleeding in my arms. My hands were shaking, but my grip on him was steady. I looked up. Lyra was cuffing Rourke, and I saw it. One of the cops was holding a press camera. The Graybridge Ledger's live stream was still active. The camera was on me, on us. I held Ernesto tighter. I leaned in, my lips close to his ear, but my voice was clear, hard, and meant for the microphone I knew was still on. "Nobody," I whispered, "burns my home." The Red Harbor Syndicate was broken. Finch, Davies, Oates, they all talked. They confessed, trying to cut deals. The trafficking ledger was real. Rourke was buried under a mountain of digital and human evidence. And the Comet Diner, my little, greasy, broken-down diner, it became a symbol. It was the place where a waitress with a coffee pot, a clean cop, and a man who lived by his own rules had staged their final, perfect public, clear the diner. It took 3 weeks for the bullet graze on Ernesto's shoulder to heal. It left a scar, a thin, pale, perfect line, like a stroke from a pencil. He said it was a reminder. I said it was bad luck. We both knew it was a bond, drawn in flesh, a permanent mark of the moment he'd put his body between me and the world. The Comet Diner was closed for those 3 weeks. The police tape was the first thing to come down. The shattered glass was swept up. The bullet holes in the steel fridge were patched by a man Hex knew, who didn't ask questions. But it couldn't go back to being just Sal's diner. It was a landmark now. The Comet Shootout, as the Gray Bridge Ledger had dubbed it, was the talk of the city. "We can't just reopen it," I told Zoe as we sat in the empty, clean diner. "It's too much, Keely," she'd said, her eyes wide. She'd seen the live stream. The whole city had... "So we change it," I said. We formed the Comet Cooperative. Sal, who was tired of the stress and just wanted to fish, sold us the diner for $1. The money for the renovations came from an anonymous grant set up for victims of the Red Harbor Syndicate. The grant, I knew, was funded by one very large, very clean withdrawal from Ernesto's new logistics firm. Zoe and I, we were owners. The first thing we bought was a new sign. The old, buzzing, Broken Sea was retired. The new one was beautiful, a bright, retro blue neon cursive that read, "The Comet." Underneath it, where Sal's old, fake clock camera used to be, we installed a new one. It was top of the line, high definition, and aimed right at the street. It was very, very public. We weren't hiding anymore. Lyra Quinn stopped by the day before we reopened. She sat at the counter, the same one Finch had tried to vault over, and I poured her a coffee. "Rourke's trial is set for the 1st of December, she said, stirring her cup. "He's facing 110 years. With the ledger, your testimony, and the video, he will never see the outside again. Finch and Davies are singing like canaries to save their own skin." She took a sip. "The department is offering full-service witness protection, new name, new city, new life. You'd be gone by tomorrow." I looked around the diner, at the new, clean laminate on the counter, at the jukebox, now loaded with new records, at the sunlight streaming through the window, the one that used to be broken. "I'm not going anywhere, Inspector," I said. "My home is here." Lyra smiled. It was the first time I'd seen her do it. "I figured you'd say that, but I had to ask." She stood up, placing a $5 bill on the counter. "The coffee's on me, hero." "The coffee," I said, pushing the bill back, "is on the house, for you, always." Ernesto's world was shifting, too. Obsidian Court was still Obsidian Court, but it was quieter, cleaner. He'd taken the chaos of the Red Harbor collapse and forged it into something new. His new logistics company was legitimate, handling high-end security for the very same events his men used to watch from the shadows. His rules, the ones he'd spoken in the warehouse, were now company policy. No trafficking, no minors, no civilians. He was evolving, and I was terrified I was the reason. He came to the diner the night before the grand reopening. I was there alone, polishing the new espresso machine, the one I'd bought with the co-op's new funds. The bell chimed. He stood in the doorway. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't the shadow from the alley. He was just Ernesto, in jeans and a dark, simple sweater. He looked, for the first time since I'd met him, uncertain. He didn't step inside. He just stood on the threshold. "You changed the sign," he said. "It was time," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. He was silent for a moment. "I need to ask you something." I waited. "I want to stay," he said. His voice was low. He was looking at his shoes, then at me. "But I will only do it on your terms. Keely, not mine." He was asking permission. To be in my life, he was giving me the power to say no. I didn't speak. I turned around, picked up the small notepad I used for taking orders, and grabbed a pen. I wrote, in my neatest, clearest script. I tore the page out and slid it across the counter to him. He read it. "House rules," it said at the top. 1, no weapons inside, ever. Leave them in the car. I don't care who is after you. 2. This is a diner. It is not your office. It is not a meeting place. It is not a dead drop. You come here. You come as a customer. 3. You always pay for your coffee. He read the short list twice. I watched his face. I saw that tiny, almost invisible smile, the one that only ever touched the corners of his mouth. He took the pen from my hand, and at the bottom of the notepad paper, like it was a treaty, he signed his full name, Ernesto Serrano. This, he said, tapping the paper, is the most difficult negotiation I've ever been in. My lawyers would advise against it. I'm not your lawyer, I said, taking the paper back. I know. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the counter. But I have one question about the terms. What? What about the clause? He said, his eyes glittering. Where the second cup is free for the guy who is dating the owner. We can discuss that amendment, I said, trying not to smile. That night, after I'd finished the prep for the morning, I locked the front door. The diner was dark, lit only by the new blue neon glow from the street. I was exhausted. I turned, and he was there. He'd been sitting in the back booth, the one where he'd watched me during the Finch takedown. He'd been silent for an hour. The jukebox, the one that had been a listening device, was now just a jukebox. He'd put a coin in. A slow instrumental jazz tune began to play, the same one from the warehouse. He didn't say anything. He just stood up and held out his hand. I walked to him. I put my hand in his. He pulled me close. We danced. Right there, on the black and white linoleum tile. Still damp from my mop. There was no performance. There was no crowd. It wasn't the calculated waltz from the gala. It was just a sway. I rested my head on his chest. His arms were wrapped around me. His hands splayed flat against my back, holding me. I wasn't in satin. I was in my old work jeans and a t-shirt. He wasn't in a tuxedo. He was in a sweater that was soft against my cheek. I put my hand flat on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating, strong, steady, and slow, thump, thump, thump. He tucked his chin, resting his forehead against mine. We stopped moving, just swayed in place, breathing each other in. I'm not rushing this time, he whispered, his voice a rough vibration that I felt more than heard. I'm staying, right here, with you. I tilted my head back. He looked at me, his eyes dark and full of a quiet, profound warmth I had never seen. This was the real him, not the boss, not the shadow, just Ernesto. He kissed me. It was a deep, slow, searching kiss that tasted like coffee and promises. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss from the warehouse. It was a kiss that said home. It was a kiss that said forever. The reopening was a circus. When I arrived at 6 a.m., the line was already around the block. The Graybridge Ledger had run a front-page story on the Comet Cooperative, the girl who fought back. Zoe was panicking. Keely, I can't, there are cameras. Zoe, I said, handing her an apron. It's just pancakes. Go. I unlocked the door. The day was a blur of sizzling bacon, endless coffee pots, and the happy, chaotic roar of a diner that was loved. Around noon, the bell chimed. Ernesto walked in. The diner went quiet for a split second. Everyone recognized him from the gala pictures, from the rumors. He walked straight to me, behind the counter. He looked at the chaos, at the tickets piling up, at me trying to make 4 milkshakes at once. You're in the weeds, he said. I'm dying, I said. He did something I never, ever expected. He took off his expensive wool coat, hung it on the hook, and grabbed a clean apron. Where do I start, he asked. He was adorable, and completely, utterly useless. He was a man who could dismantle a criminal empire, but he couldn't figure out the commercial coffee grinder. He spilled grounds everywhere. He tried to use the milkshake machine and sprayed half of it onto his shirt. He tried to work the register and gave a customer $40 in change for a $10 bill. He was a disaster, and I had never been more in love with him in my life. The customers were laughing. They were taking pictures of the city's most notorious, mysterious man, looking completely baffled by a cash register. He just sighed, looked at me, and smiled that tiny, rare smile. "The second cup is free." Right. That night, we were alone again. The last customer was gone. The diner was clean. We stood by the front, ready to lock up. I looked at the blue neon sign, painting the rainy street outside. "You know," I said, leaning my head on his good shoulder, "I let you use my phone that night. A simple favor." He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me tight. "In return," I continued, "you cleared my diner. You saved my home. You cleared it twice. 3 times if you count the reopening rush," he murmured. I smiled. "It seems fair." He turned me to face him. He cupped my face, his hands warm. "Fair," he said, his voice low and certain, just before he kissed me, "and for life." The bell above the door chimed, a soft, tinny sound as I turned the key in the lock. The camera, our camera, pulled back, away from the counter, past the empty booths, out the front door, into the cool, wet night. The new neon sign of the Comet glowed, a steady, unbroken beacon in the Graybridge rain. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. And if you really loved it, please hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.